Chair Allen, I believe we are now live streaming.
Great, thanks very much. I'd like to go ahead and call the Sherwood School Board to order for Wednesday, January 20th, 2021. Ainsley, would you like to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which I stand, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Great, thank you. We've got a pretty full agenda today. We're going to go through our ordinary agenda items. We're going to have information and discussion then on two items, update on reopening plans and high school grading practices. We'll take public comment after that, and then we'll have action items that'll follow the information and discussion and public comment. So with that, has everyone had an opportunity to look at the consent agenda, and do I have a motion?
Mr. Chair, I move that we adopt the consent agenda as presented.
I'll second.
Been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next item up, unfortunately, is Spotlight On. Dr. Cordy.
Thank you, Chair Allen. I think what that means is that there's the acknowledgement that January is School Board Recognition Month, and I will make this very brief. I know every year this is an uncomfortable moment. You don't do this job that you volunteer for to be in the spotlight, and this has been a particularly hard year. And so with that, and Ainsley, you are very much included in our appreciation as our student representative, but we would like to just very simply show you a video that we put together to say thank you. Ms. Andre? Hello, board members. As you know, every January is identified by the governor in our state as Board Recognition Month. And this year is certainly no different. But what is different is how my administrative team and I will be sharing our thoughts and words of appreciation and gratitude for who you are as a board and as individuals. I hope you enjoy this compilation of our thoughts.
Good evening, Sue, Pat, Jessica, Mike, and Eric. I just want to take time to thank you for your gift of time and also for your thoughtful approach to decision making. Mostly, thank you for your ongoing support of our students, staff, and families of Sherwood.
Nothing speaks to your passion for kids like your celebration with the class of 2020 at graduation. You guys know how to cheer, laugh, dance, sing, jump, and celebrate like no other group.
I appreciate our partnership and working together. I think together we make the schools in Sherwood the best they can be.
I appreciate your passion for supporting historically underserved students and for asking us great questions and pushing us to provide the best possible supports to all students within our district.
I appreciate your flexibility and creativity as we navigate the pandemic.
To our incredible school board, on behalf of the Middleton community, staff, families, and students, and Mustang Sally, we thank you for all of your hard work and leadership, especially during these challenging times.
Your devotion to our community and doing what's best for all students is invaluable, and we appreciate you.
The thing that I think I appreciate most about our board of directors is that they represent the best of what can happen when a group of people come together of one mind and one accord to serve.
I've always admired and appreciated your willingness to give so much of your time and your talents to Sherwood students and the Sherwood community.
In my 8 years here, I think the thing that I've grown to appreciate the most is how focused you always are on kids.
Thank you for all of your support. In a year that has been unlike any other, it has made all the difference.
I'm grateful to our school board for your advocacy for students, families, and education. I appreciate your thoughtful approach, your funds of knowledge and trust.
I am grateful for our board that is so dedicated to the students we have in our district now, while also caring for the students that will come in future years.
Thank you for your countless hours of service and support that you have given and continue to give to our students, to our families, and to our staff.
Thank you for leading and supporting our district through some of the most challenging times we've ever faced over this last year.
Thank you so much for all that you continue to do for all of us as staff members here in Sherwood, but also for all of our students. Without you, we wouldn't be who we are. And so I just want you to know how much you're appreciated.
I appreciate your commitment to equity and for the tireless support that you provide to benefit students, staff, and our community.
Thank you so much to all of our wonderful board members. We appreciate the perspective you bring to our district and the support you have for all of our students.
Nutrition Services would like to thank you for your service and all that you do for the Sherwood community.
Thank you for your leadership and dedication to serving the diverse needs of the Sherwood community.
Margaret Mead once said, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed individuals can help change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has." I want to take this opportunity to thank you for being that small group of thoughtful, committed individuals who have and continue to influence the path of Sherwood education.
I greatly appreciate your support, leadership, and continued dedication to supporting our schools. Thank you for the countless hours you invest into making Sherwood a great place to learn and grow. Happy Board Appreciation Month.
As your superintendent, I am so grateful for your dedication to each and every student and their families. We are blessed to have you as our board of directors, and personally, I am so honored to get to lead alongside you. Thank you so much for your service and all that you do for the school district and this community. You're welcome. And with that, we're glad you like it. We'll turn it back over to Chair Allen.
Great, thank you. I think I can speak for all of us to first say thank you for an incredibly thoughtful video. It's certainly for me, and again, I think for all of us, it's an extreme honor and privilege to be able to share a small part in the future of kids in Sherwood. I can't imagine a better administrative team, staff, bargaining units, kids, and community to be able to share this work with them. And I'm glad we're able to play a small part in helping. So thank you. With that, I will go ahead and move on to reports. We'll defer Superintendent Corey's report since her materials mostly relate to the reopening discussion. And I'll move on to the ASB student representative report. Ainsley.
So this week is Unity Week at the high school, and we're trying to keep it as normal as possible. Obviously, that's not super easy. We're having our Voices Assembly tomorrow. We are very excited. And then we introduced our sparrow, Vivian, last week. She's the cutest little 6-year-old. She has, I'm forgetting, but she's adorable. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I forgot it. Yeah. Yes, so Vivian's adorable. I can't believe I forgot that. It's okay. Yes, so we're doing good. Sports are up and running. It's a hard schedule, and some sports practiced 2 times a week, and then other sports practice once, and then other sports practice all week. So it's a difficult way, but we're making it work. So no complaints here.
Great, thank you, Ainsley. Next up, SEA, Ms. Stauffer or Mr. Pace?
Hi, this is Nancy. I'll take this one.
So on behalf of the Sherwood Education Association, I want to echo the words in the video of appreciation for the work that you do for our Sherwood school community. I'm well aware of the hours that you spend after your regular jobs, both evenings and weekends away from your families, just to tend to district business. The job you do is underappreciated and even thankless because you're tasked with making decisions that have long-lasting consequences that are very often not going to please everyone. Perhaps this year with the pandemic, more so than any other year. So I and we just want to thank each of you for taking on this selfless service. In keeping with tradition, SEA has made a donation to a nonprofit that serves students as a way of honoring your service to our district. This year we felt compelled to keep the donation local in order to directly impact Sherwood students. So a donation has been made to the Bowman Family Foundation, where students and families within our school community will be helped. I also want to personally thank you, Sue, because this will be the last time that I'll be able to honor and recognize Sue Hecker for the incredible work that she's done for this district over the years. From the very first year that we met, when her firstborn Rich was in my first grade class, and every year since, I have seen her commitment and dedication to the district, and I'm just amazed and so appreciative of it. So Sue, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. I know I will see you in other places, but just not at board meetings. So thank you, thank you. That's my report.
Thanks, Nancy, for that. And the good news is we're still actually working out the timing of when Sue's resignation will become effective. And so you may get another opportunity or two to have a little bonus time. OSCA, Ms. Fiken.
Thank you. Well, that's hard to follow. We mimic everything that's already been said. In honor of Board Appreciation Month, OSCA has again made a donation of $150 to the Share Center in each of your names. This is just a small way for us to say thank you for all that you do for the community, the staff, and the students. We recognize that these times have presented you with some extraordinary challenges. We're grateful for your kindness, professionalism, caring, and especially your support of classified staff. Please know that you are truly appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up is City Council, but I don't see Councilor Rosner unless he's hiding somewhere that I don't see in the Zoom room. So with that, we'll move on to Bond Oversight Report. Taylor Giles.
Hello, and thank you, Board and Chair, for this opportunity to do what I think will be my final report from the Bond Oversight Committee. So we have substantially completed the oversight of the disbursement of the vast majority of funds. There were a very minor, almost negligent amount that still needed to be written out, but we knew exactly where those were going, and they were for overage in certain areas. I am happy to say that what was promised to the citizens of Sherwood was delivered on time and under budget, and we got a few of the extra things thanks to some diligent work by school staff and some very effective project management, as well as just a real partnership with the different governmental organizations involved and city employees and different people. It was truly an honor to see, and we got high marks, not only from me as a very much a layman in the construction world, but even from professionals that were on the Bond Oversight Committee as construction in the construction industry. Very few had ever seen a project go as smoothly and have some of the troubles that were thrown at it with labor shortages, material, tariffs being enacted, and of course the global pandemic. Any of those would have been an excuse, justifiably to throw us off course. And so the Bond Oversight Committee has been, we don't have any more scheduled meetings. If there are any additional meetings needed, then we could reconstitute. But as of now, our report is that the funds were spent in accordance with what was promised and that it was delivered.
Well, Taylor, thank you for your report, and on behalf of all of us, I want to thank you and all the members of the Oversight Committee for the work that you have done. This has been an incredible project for all of us, and your additional sets of eyes, I think, have really gone a long way toward helping our communicate with the community and build and maintain confidence by the community and the district and the work that we've done. So thank you very much for the time that you and the rest of the Oversight Committee members have put in.
All right, well, thank you very much. We do have one final letter that will be going out to the community expressing what I just did. So thank you.
Great, thank you. All right, next up is information and discussion. First item is update on reopening plans. I will turn it over to you, Dr. Cordy.
Thank you, Chair Allen. Board members, as you know, our meeting that was scheduled for last week, we postponed and rescheduled to this week, knowing that on the 19th, which was yesterday, we would be learning about the new metrics, any updates to the Ready School Safe Learner guidance, and just to really be able to have a more in-depth conversation around reopening plans. And so that's our objective tonight on this within this item of information and discussion. And so just by way of an overview, the elements that we will be discussing tonight are, again, that RSSL, the updates to that guidance, tentative reopening timeline, elementary level update. So we've got some elementary principals joining us. Our association leaders will also be sharing with you. We'll talk about vaccines and operations. So of course, all along the way, please let us know what questions you have during the presentation, which really is just a way to share the information that we've been learning about and the work that teams have been doing. So with that, I will hand it over to Mr. Bennett.
Thank you, Dr. Cordy. Good evening, Board of Directors, Chair Allen, people on Zoom watching. We'd like to start tonight by just talking about some changes to the January 19, to the metrics that came out yesterday. And just walking through this slide, the top row where it says county case rate per 100,000 people, that's the row we're looking at because we are a large county. And so just to walk through these changes, in the green, we have less than 50 cases over 2 weeks per 350 per 100,000 people, less than 50 per 100,000 people over 2 weeks. That would mean we could go ahead and just start on-site instruction for all levels. We'd still need to follow all the rules in Ready School Safe Learners, attending to cohort size and things of that nature. But on that, we could just open schools, but still following all of those regulations in Ready School Safe Learners. The yellow column is a column where we would start with elementary. And if things went well with elementary, generally start with K3, our youngest kids, and adding grades over time, adding 4 or 5. And if we were in that yellow band, we could, after we had a proven effective start to elementary where we weren't seeing transmission of COVID in our schools, we could then open grades 6 through 12, secondary schools, probably 6 through 8 first, and then high school into a hybrid model. That's the yellow column there. And we had to cut off the bottom of this chart to make it fit, so it gives some of those details down below. It just didn't display well as a slide. The orange column, the transition column, which is where we find ourselves in case rates currently in Washington County. We may start with elementary students, starting with our youngest kids, largely in K3, and then we could expand to grades 4 or 5, But while we're in the orange zone, now these metrics are advisory, not mandatory. That was one change I forgot to mention. But according to these metrics, they would not recommend starting secondary schools while we're in that orange band. And then in the red band, we would be in a distance learning model. We would not want to open any cases if we were above 300, open any schools if we were above 350 cases per 100,000. Director Adamson.
Mr. Bennett, in the interest, I know that we've got lots of folks watching online. Would it be possible at a later date, as in tomorrow at some point, to link this to our website somehow so that people can find this chart?
Absolutely, we'll make that happen. It's a good call. Thank you.
Thank you.
So just to restate one more time, in the red column, then when we have more than 350 cases per 100,000 people in the county, we would prioritize comprehensive distance learning with limited in-person instruction. So according to this change in metrics, with where we stand now, these metrics would tell us that it is safe to open elementary schools based on these metrics, starting with K3 probably, and then moving to 4-5. But we would not, while cases where they are right now, want to open slots in our secondary schools. Cases would need, according to these metrics, to fall below 200 per 100,000 people over the course of 2 weeks. There were also a couple of changes to the guidance that I just thought would be worth letting you know that were in addition to this. The major change in the guidance that came out yesterday were these metrics. There were a few other changes worth noting. One is that Ready School Safe Learner is now totally aligned with OSHA. They were largely aligned before, but now they're totally aligned. So that's just helpful. We're not looking at two sets of rules anymore. Couple minor changes that make sense. There's always been a requirement in the guidance that we identify a staff member who will be in charge of enforcing all of the health and safety protocols in Ready School Safe Learners. It's just been clarified now that we just need to make that clearly known so that all staff know who that is. And so that's one step we've made. And it also calls for schools to develop a process where staff can make suggestions about improvements to how we do health and safety protocols, or let us know if there's anything we're not doing well so that we can address it. There's another clarification that says face coverings are required. They've always been required. There are some students maybe living with disabilities that are exempt from that if their disability prohibits them from wearing a mask. But others, there is no ability to make a value statement that we don't believe in masks. You're still required to wear the mask. And the guidance calls for us to offer comprehensive distance learning to families who choose to not wear a mask, or students who choose not to wear a mask. And then there's lots of other major minor changes, things like aligning PE policies with indoor recreation guidance and things of that nature that I didn't list, but I did want to cover some of those big picture changes.
Gary, if I could just quickly add the other important point to make about these numeric metrics, not RSSL, but what's on the chart here, is these now much more closely line up with the state of Washington and with CDC. We were something of an outlier to the low end, partly because we were one of the very first jurisdictions, I think, certainly in the country, almost in the world, that had tried to establish these metrics, and we didn't have a lot to go on when we at the health authority first started establishing them.
Thank you for that, Director Allen. Any questions on the new metrics? The other thing I wanted to mention is they are based on the Harvard Global Health Institute recommendations. So these are research-based metrics that the state is using, and like Director Allen said, aligned with the state of Washington. Okay, if we go to the next slide. Just checking in on case rates, you can see that they've been below 350 per every 2 weeks for the last 3 weeks. And this is just to link it back to the chart. We're in the orange zone where we can prioritize bringing in elementary, starting with our youngest learners.
Okay, I'll go ahead and take the next couple of slides. So the governor's letter to ODE and OHA that was sent on December 23rd of last year indicated that the metrics would be advisory moving forward, that there would be a change in metrics. That's what happened yesterday. And also really asked districts across the state to take the steps necessary to start hosting those conversations around opening at the elementary level first in a phased-in approach with the target of February 15th. And so as we've been having these conversations, we would be remiss to not put together a model, a tentative reopening timeline that would fit within those parameters. So that's what I want to share with you here now. We also know that this would ultimately be pending board approval. And for the sake of this evening's conversation, you'll notice on the far left, we've noted the week that the various activities would be happening. So targeting the week of February 8th for professional development and a planning week for all K-5 teachers. And then for grades 6-12, just really want to point out that you'll see here all along the way, continuing in CDL, comprehensive distance learning, and also the limited in-person instruction, which we have ramped up slightly this week. And I received some exciting texts about having some small groups of students in specifically in the middle school. I also heard from a bus driver today about how excited he was to have some students on his bus. So that was really great to hear. But you'll note in that column for grades 6-12, and because of the metrics that Mr. Bennett just described, it's continuing in CDL and ramping up limited in-person instruction as we are able to in a real wise, methodical way, while always monitoring the advisory metrics all along the way. So back to the elementary level. The next week, February 15th, we are referring to that as the first week of in-person instruction for grades K-3. And that really would serve as a transition week. That Monday is a holiday, but on Tuesday and Wednesday, Tuesday would be half of the students, Wednesday the other half, and then Thursday and Friday, all students. And then 4-5 would continue in comprehensive distance learning. The overall big picture is 3 weeks for K-3, and then moving in 2 weeks rather, and then moving into 4-5 and monitoring and learning all along the way. So we'll go ahead and look at the next slide. February 22nd. Continuing K-3, and then 4-5, March 1st is when the first week of in-person instruction would be that transition week for grades 4-5. Very similar model, having half the students on Monday, half on Tuesday, and the rest of all students attend the rest of the week. So that is the tentative reopening timeline that we have created, and we would be happy to answer any questions for you.
Questions?
Yes, I have a couple, I think for the benefit of folks who may be joining this conversation for the first time online. So Dr. Cordy or Mr. Bennett, could you share with us why it's necessary for us to take a pause for a week to do some training for elementary teachers?
I'd be happy to take that question. So for one, just training in the health and safety protocols takes a fair bit of time. Those operational blueprints are 20-something pages long. They contain detailed protocols that we need to follow, and they're the protocols we know we need to follow to keep kids safe. So just that aspect takes some time. And then teachers will need time to figure out how they're going to train that to their kids, because we're going to have kindergartners walk into our building for the first time and first graders for the first time since March and so on down the line. And they're not only going to have to learn how to do school again, but they're going to have to learn how to do school in a different way. And so it's going to require careful planning by teachers to figure out how to teach kids all of those different routines they need. And then there's things of room setup, getting your room set up in a different way. It's not going to be the same room setup we've seen before. In fact, we've talked about this before, that school will look different than it has in the past for kids. So getting room set up, and then just planning to teach in person, where all the instruction they've done has been virtually. There will even be technology set up in classrooms, and just moving back to some stuff being in print and organizing books. And there is probably more than a week's worth of stuff to do for teachers on the learning new protocol side, learning new ways to teach. They're going to have to adjust their instruction and plan for that, teach the kids these new protocols, set up their rooms. And so there's a significant chunk of work there. I'm sure there's things I'm missing, but that's the big picture gist of it.
And we can anticipate, again, the reason why we don't have dates on 6 through 12 is that we're still in that orange phase now. So we have no idea when we'll be in yellow and potentially be able to open to high school. But we can anticipate that should we get into the yellow phase, that we will need to do the same at the high school level. We'll need to have a week pause so that we're able to do the same kind of teacher training at the secondary levels.
Really, anytime we would transition from a comprehensive distance learning model into an in-person hybrid model, we're going to need that time to train teachers and figure all that out. And it's honestly a little bit more complex at the high school. It's significantly more complex at the high school and middle school, just because of the numbers of kids and the way they move through a day, that it requires even more diligence and training and careful thought. Even things like lunch is really challenging.
Thank you.
Other questions?
I have a question. So how would it look if, oh my gosh, I forgot my question. No, I didn't. Would people be able to opt out of in-person classes? Would they be able to only do at home classes if they weren't comfortable?
That's a good question. And so we did make a commitment to families that if they were in a hybrid model and they signed up at the beginning for a hybrid model and we moved into in-person, that they would have the opportunity to move to the cloud campus. So we've sent an initial survey to families asking them not to commit, because we didn't have enough information for them at the time about what our schedule would look like, what the day would look like, but to get a sense, and you'll learn a little bit more about that later in the presentation. So people will have the option.
Thank you.
Other questions? Onward.
Good evening, Board of Directors and Superintendent Cordy. One of the reopening requirements is to have an updated operational blueprint for school re-entry. And our work on the blueprint at the elementary level began this summer. And we brought together staff from all 4 of the buildings, and both certified and classified groups were represented on that team. This group crafted the original blueprint. Feedback was then gathered from a small group of staff at each building. After the decision to go to CDL, admin continued to revisit and update the blueprint based on guidance updates. This past week, each building administrator met with team leaders to review the blueprint. We also hosted all staff input sessions. At these meetings, staff were asking clarifying questions about details of the plan and made suggestions for changes. Today, we held a staff forum and addressed several topics such as blueprint updates, metrics, proposed reopening timelines, and potential staff movement and hires due to shifts in student class placement. On this slide, it is a sample student schedule. We're proposing a 4.5-hour school day with no lunch served at school. As you can see, the day will still consist of community circle, as that social emotional learning is so important. The day also includes in-person instruction in reading, writing, math, and phonics. Students will be given a snack break and 2 movement breaks throughout the morning. Lunch will be eaten at home, and specials, science, social studies, and health will continue to be taught asynchronously.
Ms. Salm.
Yes.
This is Heather. I'm wondering if you can talk a bit about the conversations that have taken place relative to lunchtime and the adjustments that have been made just very recently to what a sample student schedule would be based on staff input. Could you share with the board and folks listening just a little bit more about that, please?
Yes, this was a response to staff survey about concerns of no mask in the classroom when students would be eating lunch at school, and then just the amount of staff that it would take to cover the recess and recess and lunch times in individual classrooms. And that is why we made the adjustment to go to a 12:15 dismissal versus 1:15.
Thank you. Board members, any questions for Ms. Salm?
So just clarity, there, students would be provided a lunch on their way home in the same way that we're providing access to meals now. And what would that look like for students who, and I'm sorry if I'm asking a question that we don't haven't quite figured out yet, but for students who are coming and depend upon school breakfast, what does that look like for them, given those same concerns?
Okay, so we, with the lunches now, breakfast is also included with those lunches, and we will continue to put the breakfast with the lunch. So the students would have the lunch for that day and the breakfast for the following day.
That's great, thank you.
Any other questions for Ms. Salm?
So I had actually two. One was just kind of a clarifying question about, so when we do these movement breaks, this may be inside or these may be outside, but the classes, in order to limit the number of interactions between kids, the kids will still just be in their teacher classroom groups. Is that correct?
They will be with their cohorts. If they are outside, we will have the playground separated, so each cohort would have their own space to be able to take that movement break, or we will move the kids to larger spaces in the building. So their snack break will not be in their classroom. The snack break will be in a part of the building where we can spread the kids out more, or it will be outside where we can spread the kids out when they take their mask off to eat.
Okay, thank you. My other question was, can you give us an idea of what pickup and drop off will look like? Before the pandemic, it seemed like that was kind of a congested bottleneck of getting large masses of people together. Can you kind of share some of the thoughts you have on what arrival and dismissal will look like?
So yes, well, it will look different at each of the buildings because we each have different layouts. I know at two of the schools, the staff have doors going to the outside. So students will enter through the classroom doors, the outside classroom doors. We are still working on the details of our plans, knowing that we have to have kids coming in different entries so the cohorts aren't commingling, and those are some things that we are still working on. Those are some of the changes that were suggested in the blueprint, and we are all still working out the details of arrival and dismissal.
Thank you.
Other questions? If not, let's move to the next topic.
Good evening, Board of Directors, Superintendent Cordy and Ainsley. At this time, I'd like to introduce Patina Fiken, who is one of our OSEA presidents, and she'll represent our classified staff by sharing some information.
Thank you, Steve. I sent a survey out to classified staff, just asking some information that came out with what Governor Brown shared right before Christmas. I had 140 people responding. We asked what level they worked with, and we purposely separated out K-3, 4, 5, then middle school, high school, SIPOL district office. We asked how, if they support returning to in-person instruction as soon as possible. And that was 58% was a no, 33% were a yes, and 9% didn't really have an opinion. When asked regarding returning to instruction using the previous metrics, with the county case rates less than 100 per 100,000, then the answers were 69% were yes, more comfortable with coming back to in-person instruction, with 31% no. We also asked their level of comfort regarding returning to in-person instruction. 48% of staff felt that all staff should have the option to receive both doses of the vaccine, as well as the 14-day waiting period following each dose prior to coming back to in-person. And then the next highest was 22% were comfortable if all safety measures were put into place. I can tell you that 76% of the answers that we have received of staff are planning on receiving the vaccine. When asked what their highest priority was for returning, it's both safety and vaccine. I also gave them the opportunity of sharing anything that they wanted to know. And there's a lot of concern for both staff and students properly wearing not only masks, but any other PPE. There's concerns of the recent information on the news of new strains of COVID. And then the other large concern is, while school district staff are eligible to receive the vaccine, their family members within their home, whether it's their spouse or other family members that are elderly or sick that they have to take care of, that they are at risk, but they are not eligible to get the vaccine yet. So there's a huge concern for them bringing COVID home and infecting their own families. Is there any questions?
Any questions for Ms. Feiken?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, at this time, I'd like to introduce Kyler Pace, who is one of our co-presidents for SEA, and he would like to share similar information representing our licensed staff.
Thank you, Mr. Emmert. So similar to OSEA, we felt the need to get some information from our members as well. And back before the new metrics are in place this week, we just wanted to get a feel for how our members felt about the change in metrics going from mandatory to advisory. And so we sent out a survey knowing that we were going to get limited information, especially since we didn't know very specific details on what the district was planning as far as reopening. So again, that's before we knew this week's change in the guidance and the metrics. So we had 267 of our members respond to the survey, and that was nearly 100% of our members. So the first question, do you support reopening as soon as possible? We had 73% say no, 27% said yes. Next question was, do you support continuing to use the case rates before when we had the previous case rates of under 100,000, and 81% were in support, 19% said no. Then we asked our members what their top priority was for having in place in order to feel comfortable to reopen. And we had 55% say availability of a vaccine, 20% said meeting the county health metrics, 16% said having robust safety protocols and procedures in place, and then 9% of our members said none of those are super important and I'm ready to open right now. So one thing I would put on that, the caveat, we did have a number of members in the comments say that even though they had to choose one of those as their top priority, they felt that they were all equally important before returning to in-person learning. So we also gave our members the opportunity to have open-ended comments, and many members took the opportunity to do that. And we compiled over 20 pages of comments that our members gave to us. So of course we had everything from members that want to open as soon as possible. And we also have, the other extreme of that of people that want to remain in CDL for the rest of the year. So I wanted to give you a couple of specific comments that we heard from people and some common themes. So there were a lot of comments around the vaccine and the need to wait until we have the vaccine available to those who want it in order to reopen. So we had one teacher that said, with cases of infection and the death count at an all-time high, I feel it would be extremely irresponsible to go back to in-person learning. We need to wait for teachers to get the vaccinations. We owe this to our hospitals and first responders not to make this pandemic any worse. We had a lot of teachers who also commented they were concerned about coming into in-person learning and bringing it back home to somebody who is at high risk that they are living with. So another member said, I understand the urgency people are feeling. I hope we can be strong and make choices that are safest for all. My husband is high risk and I can't bring it home to him. I hope the district honors the situations we are in and waits for either a vaccine or a much lower COVID numbers in our county. We're so close, please wait. And a final common theme that we heard was around just how we're going to be able to teach and do our jobs within the guidance. So as you've heard, teaching is not going to look the same once we're able to get back in. And it's a real concern that we're going to disrupt the distance learning that we have been working on and come back to in-person learning. And there are a lot of questions and concerns that it may not work as well as we're hoping. As you know, today our elementary staff just found out about the proposed timeline to have our staff development the week of the 8th, with bringing kids back in person on February 15th. Nancy and I both sat in forums for 2 different schools, and there are a lot of concern from our teachers around that proposed timeline. And I believe that many teachers feel blindsided by how fast that is coming up. And what we heard over and over again from those teachers is that we're so close to being able to get vaccinated and having being able to come back fully vaccinated, even if we are just to wait a couple weeks, that they really don't think that we should be rushing into reopening. We had a lot of teachers express that they are considering their different options they have to take leave. And there are teachers that are feeling like that they're going to be forced to make a decision between their career and what's best for their family. And they also don't want to have to make a choice that could potentially break up their classroom that they've been with and their kids that they've been with for over half the year now already. So our plan is to get another survey out to our elementary teachers now that we have an idea what the proposal is to move forward. And so we're hoping to collect that data and have some better information about how all of our elementary teachers are feeling. And then we look forward to continuing our conversations next week.
Any questions for Mr. Pace? Looks like on to the next topic.
Thank you, Chair Allen. Good evening, Board of Directors and Superintendent Cordy. So just a little less than 2 weeks ago now, we sent out a survey to elementary families in our district from each of the 4 elementaries. And this slide summarizes the results of that survey. Just a couple of points of note. this is, again, this represents a district-wide data. This is not a single school. This data was not collected with sort of this notion of a binding contract approach. So it could change as we draw near a potential reopening, depending on a number of factors, families' needs, and so forth. And you can see in the first bullet that this does not represent 100% of our families. This represents approximately just a little over 70% of the 1,882 students who are currently enrolled in our elementary schools. But it's still, quite frankly, we're pleased with the results. The survey, admittedly, was a fairly binary choice with not a whole lot of construct around what that could look like. So we're grateful to the families who were able to respond to this. Of the families or students who were not represented in this, 132 of those, might be worth noting, are currently enrolled in our cloud. So we might interpret that those families are thinking, I'm not intending to move from the cloud. I made my commitment early in the year. And so it's not terribly surprising that a large number of those families would not have responded necessarily to this survey. But the results of those who did, as you can see here, indicates that approximately 153 students would be interested, at least in this initial ask, to move from the current CDL class to the cloud. And conversely, of those who responded, approximately 19 would like to move from the cloud to in-person. So obviously, there's many more who would move from their option of in-person to the cloud. These moves, to the best of our estimates, could potentially result in moving or adding anywhere from 4 to 6 additional teachers to the cloud to accommodate that shift of student population. And the obvious implication of that is that this level of movement mid-year has some pretty high potential for impacts on multiple classrooms.
Questions for Mr. Smith?
So 153 across, 4 different schools and multiple different grade levels. It's unlikely that we are looking at numbers that are sufficient that would enable a full classroom of currently CDL kids to move all the way to classroom, that there are sprinkles of these across different grades and different teachers. Are we looking at ways to try and accommodate the additional, well, let me start with this. Have we identified what grades in particular would need additional support versus, which grades we could try and absorb the increase in the existing cloud campuses? I mean, with the goal of trying to minimize the disruption for students.
And I'm going to look at Mr. Emmert, who's got a whole lot of information to share with you around the staffing challenges. And so I think it might come through that conversation.
Yeah, thank you. That is really a perfect segue. Thank you, Mr. Smith. Perfect segue into the next slide. And that really is the impact to our district on staffing based on the results of the family survey. And as Tim said, this was an initial survey. We don't believe that necessarily is the final information. It's the information gathered based on what was asked in that survey. However, as Tim said, we're looking at 4 to 6 teachers potentially to staff the increase in the cloud campus. And that, if it is, let's say we add 6 teachers to the cloud campus, that's likely going to disrupt 20 or more of our current classes. If it's 4, potentially more. And so there's no, it's going to be painful, because it's going to mean that mid-year students some students are going to have a new teacher, and it's going to mean that mid-year our classes that we've had established so far this year will change. They will look different. We've done a cost analysis just on the cost to add that additional FTE. We likely would need to also add potentially 4 instructional assistants to staff that cloud campus. In answer to your question specifically, Jessica, I think a part of the analysis will be to make sure we have accurate information and then to determine where those students will need to go, so that we know best how to create staffing. The other impact and challenge that we have right now is, as Kyler shared, we will have a number of teachers who will ask for a leave of absence and likely will qualify for a leave of absence when we come back to in-person instruction. And so in addition to, and those teachers who want to move to the cloud campus and have ADA impacts would have the first option to move to the cloud campus. So a part of what we're having to determine is, as we hire some additional teachers to staff up, so to speak, to keep class sizes manageable, who will we move from in-person instruction or from current CDL classrooms into the cloud campus, and then what's the best way for us to backfill in those positions? And if we have teachers who go out on leave, then we will also be backfilling those positions. So we have some challenges ahead of us, and we know that our goal is to make sure we're taking care not only of our students, to get them back in the classroom as soon as we can, but also to take care of staff, to make sure we're keeping staff safe, giving preference to those who are compromised in one way or another, to potentially fill some cloud campus positions.
Questions for Mr. Emmert?
So I have a quick question. So I know the survey went out. When did that go out to the families? Was that last week? Obviously, it was prior to the information that came out on the 19th, correct?
Yes, I want to say it was maybe the week before last.
Okay.
I'm losing track of time, but.
Okay, yeah, it seemed pretty quick after our last work session. So the question I had, I know we got some responses back that there was some confusion, and all of this is changing. I mean, we know that the one thing that's happened since March is that we continue to change as we learn more and we follow the science. The metrics change. What we it may have been what we thought was accurate in April maybe isn't, and it's changed, most of it in a good way, but we do know more information. Is there an opportunity for us to really be able to help these families understand that, yes, we know that school isn't going to look the same. It's not, if they're picturing the same classroom with everyone together, that it's different, that there are a lot of safety measures and protocols, and that, it's just different. Is there going to be an opportunity for people to really learn a little bit about that before making this final decision? So that they can make a little bit more of an, for lack of better terms, just kind of an educated decision on what that does or doesn't look like.
Yeah, so one of the things we've talked about was for people to have the opportunity to see this presentation tonight, so that they could see a potential timeline, and so they could see what the schedule would look like for students during the day. And then once they had that information, to reach back out and gather information so that we have a more accurate accounting of what families are hoping to do.
Steve, I'm wondering whether it makes sense to Sue's point to take that even a step further beyond what we're sharing this evening. But whether it makes sense for both our families and for that matter, our staff who have some safety concerns and may or may not fully appreciate the metrics, which are pretty, I get super nerdy about them, which I think is pretty fun, but not everyone is as much of a super nerd as I am. So, I mean, I think that there may be some benefit for us to bring in local public health and do an opportunity for our community to really hear from them on what these metrics mean, what they've done elsewhere, how that interplays with vaccine availability or not. There are many other districts in the country operating under these kinds of metrics well before the vaccine was available. In addition to what the OSHA guidelines mean and what they mean for both teacher and student and classified staff safety, because we're one of the only states in the country to have COVID specific regulations on workplaces that are designed not just to keep workers safe, but also students. And now that they're aligned with the Ready Safe Learners guidance. So I think that there may be, we're in the education world, there may be some education that I think may be helpful and an opportunity for people to be able to submit questions so that we can get some of those answered too. I just think that we owe it to ourselves and to our community to have people making the best decision they can for their family and their kids based upon the best information we have. And I think there's a bit of a disconnect, not for lack of people trying, but because the guidance changes and trying to understand that. I get to talk to people who know what they're talking about this most of my day. That's a little bit different than if you're sitting at home and trying to sort through all of the different pieces of advice online. So I think bringing in some experts and being able to provide that guidance, because what I fear, if someone signals, well, I want to move to the cloud campus because this is the information that I had or made my decision on, that has ripple effects not only for their kids, but if other teachers get moved for the very challenging relationships that had to be built this year in ways that are different. And I'm not suggesting that a decision to move your kid to the cloud campus or keep them in person or move them back, that all has to be made on a family by family basis. And that's important. But I also don't want people making decisions without all of the information, assuming that they have it all or wishing, then 2 months later, wishing that they had more information. Sorry, that was a lot.
Yeah, and I think we covered it a little bit in the work session last time, but I think there really is, it's been changing so much that there is a perception that, oh, we didn't make this metric, so we're going to make it easier to make, and we still don't make it, and that's not, in fact, the case. We actually have better information that's grounded in science that says, K3 can come back sooner than the rest of the students. Because I think that's probably the feeling, is that there's a perception of, oh, we didn't make it, so we're just going to make it easier and easier until we can get everybody back, when in fact it's not that at all. It's just that we've had some time to gather correct information and know what works and frankly what doesn't work. And we know masks work and all of these other things in place are highly effective. So yeah, to Jessica's point, I think getting to the current information rather than the information that was out there in June or even September or, as soon as October, November, it's just changed. And I think it would be really valuable for people to understand that there's good information out there now.
And also part of this is based on our neighbor to the north, Washington State, and their experience. They've been following metrics very close to what we have now, and they're a little further along on the path to reopening. So I think there's some experiences that we can look at that they have with K through 3 for both our families and staff to maybe share some information and allow a more informed decision by everyone involved.
Yeah, thank
Let's
you.
go ahead and
That's
move
all
on
really
to
good
the
advice. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was saying thank you. That's great advice, and we'll have to take that back as a team and think about how we might be able to do some of those things.
Let's go ahead and move on to the next topic.
Thank you, Chair Allen, Superintendent Cordy, members of the board. I get to talk to you about our vaccines and the great hope that they are for us. But we began talking about vaccines as soon as we learned that educators would be prioritized. Our folks across the county at the various school districts and the ESD started working with Washington County Public Health to talk about what does this look like. As it became clear that we're going to be prioritized even higher, we started having those meetings on a weekly basis. We have stood up a couple of groups to talk about it. I'm a part of one that's mostly folks in roles like mine. We had been talking about how do we support clinics within the county. We were heading down that road, and as you might imagine, things change on a regular basis, including the timelines. And we've recently learned that the 4 large healthcare providers that operate across the metro area will be standing up a large-scale vaccination clinic for all staff of education agencies. We're talking about prioritization and timing and some of those kinds of things at this point. We're waiting to see for sure what their directions are in terms of the rollout. And so working through the details, and we'll share those out with our folks just as soon as we possibly can. We did do, within the last couple of weeks, we actually went ahead and surveyed our staff to find out just generally what's the interest in a vaccine. This is something that none of the other districts around us had done, and so we're kind of a little bit ahead of the game for them. We had great returns on the number of people that actually replied. We actually had 538 by the deadline, and we had about half those were our certified staff, and these numbers kind of break down with the overall staff makeup of the district. And then if we move to the next slide, you can see the response is overwhelmingly they're interested in receiving the vaccine, nearly 87%, which I think is a great number. The ones that are represented by that 13.2 are a little bit across the board in terms of each of the various employment groups. So it's roughly about 70 people out of the survey. The next topic is actually rapid testing, and this is something that has come up recently to us. A new requirement beginning March 1st, if we don't meet the metrics and are open, we have to provide self-administered rapid tests to any student or staff that is symptomatic of COVID-19 or has had known exposures. And we're just now starting to learn about this, and we're finding that we're going to get a lot more information from OHA to provide the test and the supports around it. And then we also will likely have some expenses that come along with that, and we can use some of the grant funds that we've received for that. We have heard that the federal government may require testing for all students weekly, all students and staff weekly, but that's at this point just one of those things that I think the Biden administration has floated, but certainly has not made a decision on yet. So we're kind of waiting to see what the outcome of that conversation is. I'll pause there just to see if there's any questions on either the vaccine or rapid testing.
Questions on vaccines or testing?
Was there any indication of when we might have a little more clear idea on the vaccines? When, is it, we'll know in a week, we'll know in, hard to say, obviously, but.
It's very challenging to say. The governor has said as of the 25th, folks in education communities can get the vaccine. At this point, it's a determination of whether or not there's enough in the metro area and what that rollout looks like. And I know the chief operating officers of the various healthcare organizations are having those conversations. And we're kind of a little bit waiting for them to give us the answer to those questions. So.
And I can add a little bit to that. It's a little like everything else around the pandemic. It's a little bit of building the plane while you're still flying it. It looks like we're going to be able to provide enough vaccine around the state to be able to vaccinate the majority of teachers in the 2 weeks that they'll have basically exclusive opportunity, along with the rest of the 1A population, to get vaccinated before we open to people 80 and above on February 8th. But this is all still really kind of dependent on how prioritization in the metro area for use of the convention center facility works and what the vaccine supply looks like. So I think more details, and in particular, how people will sign up for an appointment at the convention center should be coming out in the next 48 hours or so, because they are going to be ready to operate that facility next week.
Sorry, one further question. Will teacher prioritization at the elementary level, is that being considered? So, vaccinate the elementary teachers first, since they're most likely to go back sooner.
I think
Yeah, that's one of the schemes that's being looked at for potential.
Okay, thank you.
I was going to say that is one of the there are a number of ways to do prioritization, and that's one of
Just for the sake of health systems, this is hugely vaccine supply dependent. And that is not something that is controlled by the state, and it's not something controlled by hospitals. This is entirely us being dependent upon federal allocation. And so I think there are a lot of folks that are working literally as we speak to try and figure this out, and are working very hard. And you should know that the health systems in your community are doing everything they can to move heaven and earth to make this happen and to get vaccines in arms. And this is really hard. So big thanks to our partners at the state and to everyone else working with us to do this. The reason why we don't have answers is because we are dependent upon the federal government to give us those, and they have been hard to come by consistently recently.
I would only add that as someone who started to look into how do we do one of these clinics here, I'm very, very thankful that our healthcare providers have partnered with us to take that on. That's their area of expertise, and we're going to be well served by letting them do that. So, if there's no more questions, I'll move on to a couple more things. We'll move on to operations. So, as I think you probably know, we've been working for quite some time on how to go about reopening, and particularly on the operations side, what does that really look like, and what changes do we need to make? Starting with our transportation department, they are implementing new cleaning and disinfecting strategies. And so working with their bus drivers on when do they wipe down hard surfaces, when do they'll use a back-to-back sprayer in their buses between days, and those kinds of things. So they're working hard to make sure that our buses are clean. We're looking at staggered seating and those kinds of things to make sure that students are separated as much as possible. And then also the drivers will be trained on visual screening for symptoms. So that way, if a student gets on the bus and shows symptoms, we have a means or protocol to handle that. So Sandy and her team have been working hard on that. On the facility side, you've heard us talk some about the amount of work we've spent with our heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems, and really trying to get the most out of those that we can. We've been fortunate that through the bond, we've been able to upgrade over the last few years in a lot of spaces. But we've gone ahead and upgraded all filters that we can across the district. They're a minimum of MERV 8. They're MERV 13s wherever we can. And the higher the number after the MERV means the better the filtration. And so we're working really hard to make sure that those are installed on a regular basis, replaced as needed. They all got replaced after the forest fires last fall. So we're doing those kinds of things. We are implementing the use of air purifiers in high traffic areas, such as the office. They're also going into the isolation rooms, those kinds of things. We're distributing as much PPE to the buildings as we can. We've provided masks to all staff and face shields last fall, or actually last spring. And so those are out there, and then we're continuing to look for and try to receive as much other PPE as we can in terms of KN95 masks, those kinds of things. And then we're also, with the facilities group, custodians in particular, are working hard to implement new cleaning protocols and disinfecting protocols to make sure that when we bring students back in, they're in as safe of environment as we can provide. On the nutritional services side, we are continuing with our meal hubs and delivery for CDL students, while also planning to implement on-site meal delivery, which you heard about earlier this evening. So that's really about as a student leaves for the day, they might grab a sack and they'll have their lunch and the next morning's breakfast with them, but also, again, continuing to provide meals to the students that are in the cloud. On the technology front, we are implementing a digital contact tracing system, so similar to what adults currently use when they come in and out of our buildings, but more, well, aimed at our students, so that way, if we have any potential COVID cases, our nurses are able to help with the contact tracing piece. One area that we found that we were not quite where we want to be was with augmented audio in the classrooms. And we recognized with the wearing of masks that it will be that much more important for teachers to have that option so students can hear them clearly through the mask. And so we have gone ahead and ordered enough to make sure that every K-8 class in the district has a system. The new high school was built with a system in every classroom. So when those are delivered and installed, we will have enough to cover all K-12 classes. So that's great news. And then, as you also know, the ongoing operation of the technology hub, it's been moved. It was running out of Archer Glen. It's now at Sherwood Middle School in the kind of old technology office. And that's for the support of staff and student devices, both students that might be in the building or staff that might be in the building, as well as those that are in the cloud or continuing on with CDL. Those are some of the operations changes that we're doing to be ready to have students in our building.
Questions about operations?
I don't really have a question, but just, you know, all of the data that's been presented tonight, I'm just so impressed. I know there's been so much work done on this since last summer, and it's been changed and readdressed, and we've had to, I haven't done any of it, everyone else has done it, but the flexibility and the thought and the gathering of input to get to where we are and to see an actual day for these K3, 4, 5 kids that's so thoughtfully done, and we know it's different, is just impressive, down to, you know, cleaning the buses and the transportation and the nutrition services. So thank you all for this incredible amount of work and thought, and we know it's still going to be ever changing, but I really am impressed at your creativity and the way that you've worked so hard to get these students back in the classrooms.
So the slide that's up now says discussion, and I'd actually like to propose kind of a way of working through this. As was mentioned early on, moving forward requires board action, and that's, and you've maybe noticed that's not an agenda item on the agenda tonight. What I'd like to do though is we have one other information topic. I'd like to go ahead and plow through that. I'd then like for us to hear the public testimony we have on the assumption that the overwhelming majority of it is on this same topic. And that way we can have, before we actually move into discussion, have the benefit of that public testimony as well as the materials that we've just heard. And then what I'd like us to really try to do when we have that discussion is sort of focus a little bit on dates, but also focus on what are the principles that we want to use to actually take a vote to move forward, and whatever schedule that's on. What are the things that we think need to happen, or that we want to consider as we do that. So be thinking about that part of the discussion for moving forward. We'll do that after we take public testimony, but first we're going to hear a presentation on high school grading practices.
Thank you, Chair Allen. We'll wait till our slide comes up here. It's interesting, we're talking about reopening schools as we're talking about a high school grading practice change that is directly related to the impact of the pandemic on students. And as you can imagine, what we're seeing in Sherwood, what we're seeing in Sherwood is what people are seeing across the state as I talk to others in education and read articles, that we're just seeing more kids struggle in school in the pandemic than we did beforehand. And so what we want to do tonight, if you can go to the next slide, please, Christine, is we'll share a little bit of data with you, and then we'll talk about one, really it says changes, but really one change to our grading practices that will be in place for the pandemic. And so as we go through these slides, I think there's two important things to note, is that one, our data generally looks better than data in other districts. Our students, teachers, community is really pulled through and engaged in distance learning in a pretty amazing way. The second thing is that our data generally looks that way. And when you look at like the number of students failing classes or things like that, it's roughly double what we normally see in times that aren't the pandemic. So just to give you a relative sense of what the challenge looks like, those would be two points of data that I think are worth noting. So if we go to the first slide, these are end of quarter 1. This is all quarter 1 data. We're still in quarter 2 right now. But these are the percentage of students with a cumulative with a cumulative GPA of less than 2.0. So you can see we've got a fair number of students who are, and we'll just go through this data fairly quickly. And there's some interesting correlations though. If you go to the next slide, if you look at the attendance rates for these students, Ms. Barron referred earlier in our work session that our attendance is off the chart. We have a lot of students whose GPAs right now are attending better than 90% of the days. And that's an unusual trend. Oftentimes you see a strong correlation between GPA and attendance, especially those chronic non-attenders. So we have kids showing up and still struggling. That's a little bit of an oddity for us. And we still have a lot of kids who are struggling with attendance. It's not to say that it's not a challenge. It's but of our students who are struggling with GPA wise, most of them are attending schools. The next slide is interesting. It shows a little bit about who is. Can you change to the next slide, please?
Can you explain what a 2.0 GPA looks like in like 1 quarter?
Well, we only have four classes. So a 2.0 GPA would be a B, 2 C's, and a D would be a 2.0, all C's. So to get below 2.0, you'd have to have 3 C's and a D to get you below a 2.0 GPA.
Thank you, that's helpful.
Sorry about that, that's a good question. If you look at this slide shows the number of students in several different groups, just to make sure we're clear on what student groups we're talking about here. The one on the far left is underserved races and ethnicities. That's a whole conglomeration of different races and ethnicities that are considered traditionally underserved. We have our ELL population. We have students on 504, students in special education, students identified as TAG. We have FRM as free and reduced meals. So those are students who are navigating poverty. And then we have students in our cloud campus, which is just a little bit different subgroup. And you can see there's disproportionality in these, which you would expect to see. You would hope not to see, but we're definitely seeing, as you've heard about the impact of the pandemic on communities of color and other traditionally marginalized groups. The next slide, I think, is maybe the one that's the most shocking, in that you see the impact on our ELL students and our free and reduced lunch students and our special education students the most. Now, granted, we're dealing with a small number of ELL students. I think there's only 14, but the impact is pretty significant on who is being impacted by this. And this runs consistent with other schools in our district in terms of EL students, English language learners in particular, and other districts are seeing the same sort of struggles, which probably is not surprising. If we go on to the next slide, this slide just shows the number of Fs by level. And so you can see we have a lot of kids with 1 F and 2 Fs, but the shocking number are the number of kids with 3 Fs and 4 Fs, in that there are 16 students in our high school who failed every class in the first quarter. And they're evenly kind of distributed among the grades. And so the high school has been working really hard on this from the start, and the next slide just shows some of the things that they've been working on. They've been doing home visits with students. They've been regularly checking in with students, asking, what do you need from us? How can we help you? What's happening in your world, and then trying to help them out in any way they can. And sometimes that's as simple as I'm struggling to log on and I need some tech support, and sometimes there are some substantial challenges going on. Some of the students have just said, I just need some help with this. I need an adult, and we've been able to bring some of those kids in for limited in-person instruction, who just need somebody to motivate them to do the work and help them out with it. Teachers have been reviewing data. I wasn't at the meeting where it occurred, but when teachers looked at this data, and there was a realization that it's maybe not just my class that the students struggling, and it's all the classes, and how can we work together. And I think there's been some conversations at the high school around what this data means, and they've worked on that level. And teachers have brainstormed what they can do. And then when it's safe, we started limited in-person instruction. So there's definitely some interventions in place going on. And but there's one systemic practice that we think is an easy change, low-hanging fruit, and we think will make a huge difference for kids. It doesn't require major changes from our teachers or any significant effort, but it can make a huge difference for kids. And on the next slide, we'll show what it is. And it's pretty straightforward. And it's just changing an F to a no grade while we're in the pandemic. And so the difference is that a no grade doesn't affect students' GPA. And one of those students we have had students who were on track and who all of a sudden in this model have struggled dramatically. And it could reduce their odds of getting into college. It could change scholarship opportunities. A no grade won't give students credit opportunities. They'll still have to re-earn the credit, and we're talking about options to do that. Everything that was, remember, part of the reason we went to a quarter system. So if a kid failed a class, they'd have 3 more opportunities to make it up instead of 2. We're also already talking about summer term or summer institute and what that looks like and how that needs to look different. But this change will help those students who need to make those up by not impacting their GPA. We're talking about this being in place for the pandemic. And I guess I would define the term. It would be, we're proposing that we're planning on doing this would be until school is open without significant restrictions. So that we would call that in a hybrid model or in comprehensive distance learning, this would apply. High schools across the state are all doing this. This is a common thing. Our students would be at a tremendous competitive disadvantage if we didn't do this. Even regardless of that, it's just the right thing to do, but that's another reason. And then this would also apply retroactively to Q1. We don't believe there's any challenges with policy or law that prevent us from doing that. We don't need to make any changes. And so we believe this will tremendously help our kids, and we just wanted to bring you up to speed on this change that we're planning on making, and we wanted to see if you had any questions or comments. Sorry for going so quickly. I just know there's a bigger conversation.
Sounds like a no-brainer.
Does this require action by us, or is this basically an inform and you're looking for any red flags?
It's the latter.
Okay.
Well, I appreciate the presentation, and the information is, it's unfortunate and disheartening, but obviously changing these Fs to an NG is just really the humane and right thing to do for kids.
I also think it goes and aligns with kind of our methodology of looking to make sure that they know the material. And so this doesn't really affect that at all. They're out there 3 days of class. They need to get once, they need to get twice. But at the end of the day, they're going to know the material, and that's what's really important.
Great. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you. All right. I think we are now ready to move on to public comment. How many do we have, Ms. Andrade?
That is an excellent question. Let me check the number. While I do that, Chair Allen, did you want to discuss any limitations around the type of public comment we read as we did last time?
Yeah, I'll just a couple of things. As before, we'll read them for a maximum of 3 minutes and stop at 3 minutes. We'll read comments from people who identify themselves, ideally with their address, but we won't read any anonymous comments. If we find ourselves reading comments that are verbatim repeats of other comments, I think we'll try to suspend that and indicate that it's a repeat comment. And then I'm given to understand there's one, the comment consists of basically a reference to a lengthy newspaper article. Rather than read that lengthy newspaper article, we'll make that article available in the minutes for the meeting and post those.
Okay, thank you. We did have 57 public comments submitted. Given the limitations that Chair Allen just described, we will be reading fewer than that, but all of those will be archived in our board archive documents.
And that's down from quite a few more last time. So
I believe it was 128 last time.
all right, dive in.
All right. Zayden Andrus, Baylor Way, Sherwood, Oregon. Dear board members, I'm Zayden, a second grader at Hawksview. I would like to go back to school. I don't like writing and I get frustrated because it's hard for me to learn through the iPad. I know that my teacher works so hard to teach us. I really like her. I know the virus is scary, but I promise to wear my mask. I really want to go back to school because my class looks really cool and so does the playground. Thank you, love, Zayden. Leah Andrus, Baylor Way, Sherwood, Oregon. Dear board members, I'm Leah, a third grader at Hawksview. I really want to go back to school. Zoom is very glitchy, and I'm in the same room as my internet. Sometimes it's very hard for me to focus because my siblings have different breaks than I do. Please let us go back to school. My teacher is doing the best she can, but people keep getting kicked out of Zoom or can't hear her. Doing school online is not the same as in person. I miss being in my classroom. I know COVID is scary. My family is doing the best we can to stay safe. We wear masks and keep our distance. I promise to do that in school. Learning from home is hard. Thank you, Leah. Megan Berry at 18335 Southwest Colefelt Lane, Sherwood, Oregon. When you say bring our youngest learners back, I assume that does not include my fourth grader. That has always excelled and loved school, but I have to force to participate in distance learning. Begs me to let her be done halfway through the day. Cries at least once a week during the Zoom school day. Who chose this kindergarten through third grade, 4th through 12th grade split? This has destroyed her love of learning, and I'm sure other kids are dealing with the same thing. Christopher Daly, Southwest Madeira in Sherwood. Given we live in the age of technology, do you plan on retaliating against students or simply accepting liability if, when media surfaces that demonstrates the school's failure to adequately enforce, adhere to OHA ODE requirements? A simple answer of yes, we will retaliate, no, we won't retaliate, and or yes, we will accept liability, no, we will not, will suffice. Saying we will do everything we can is an unacceptable smokescreen of an answer. Amy Gillette, 17589 Southwest Wapato Street, Sherwood. The advantages of in-person school will not be possible under the conditions needed to keep everyone safe. Everything will still need to happen from a distance. There will be no free time to run around, no recess where the kids can socialize, no lunchroom conversations, no teacher by their side helping them figure out what the problem is they're working on. It won't even work as a daycare type situation for parents to go back to work since it will likely be a shortened day with no before care or after care and not 5 days a week.
Braulio, 17197 Southwest Smith Avenue. My concern as a parent is to get my children all infected and sick of this virus, and later on the school closes again, as you may hear of other school districts. Dana Everett, 17090 Southwest Stellar Drive, Sherwood. I am writing as a very concerned parent in the Sherwood community. I have researched countless articles and recommendations from reputable doctors, including pediatricians in the Portland metro area, who emphatically state that children of all ages should be back in school and that implementing protocols will ensure the safety of students and faculty. The claims by select teachers and administrators that they feel unsafe returning to school has proved to be unfounded based on the feedback from top doctors and scientists in our country. It is no longer a matter of opinion, it is a fact based on the science and research from the experts. We know teachers can protect themselves with PPE, and numerous states and other districts within Oregon have successfully transitioned to in-person learning without outbreaks. Preschools in our Sherwood community have been open for months with no outbreaks on record. Teachers are essential workers. No other essential worker has the option to choose when they want to return to work. It amazes me that our district is continuing to put the kids' overall welfare last in this situation. The sentiment of wanting our kids back in school only when it is safe to do so is baseless. It is safe to do so. Our district is only perpetuating class discrimination by keeping their kids at home. Countless students need the support of their teachers and counselors to keep them motivated, especially if they do not have support system at home. For older kids, lacking this critical support can change the trajectory of their entire life. Research has already shown a drastic decrease in first-generation college-bound students as a result of the distance learning model. For younger kids, the early years of brain development are critical to the future academic success. Superintendent Cordy mentioned in her reopening schools update email on January 8th that the change in direction from Governor Brown related to reopening schools was a surprise. How is it possibly a surprise after the CDC went on record months ago that kids belong in school despite the pandemic? The science is clear, kids can safely return to school. The byproduct from remote learning for our children is devastating on so many levels. Many students are suffering on a mental, social, emotional, and academic level. We have is extremely disappointing that our district continues to take additional weeks to announce a plan to reopen after having 10 months to plan for this critical moment. Neighboring school districts have plans in place with a clear timeline to get students back in schools in their immediate future. Please prioritize our kids. Stop providing unfounded excuses and baseless claims that it is not yet safe to return to school. Facts and research disprove these claims. Our school district owes it to our kids to get them back in school as early as humanly possible. Sky Andrus, Baylor Way, Sherwood, Oregon. Dear board members, I'm Sky, a first grader at Hawksview. Can we go back to school, please? Because I want to see my friends, my teacher, and my new school. Screens are unhealthy for my eyes, and doing school all day hurts them. Sometimes I get bored, but I know my teacher is doing her best. I wish I could see her in person. Learning will be much easier. Love, Sky.
Nicole Carlson, 21540 Southwest Abisher Road, Sherwood. I think most of us agree that we all want our kids back in school. Is it safe? Will it ever be safe? That's a valid question. Unfortunately, who knows what the answer is? Will the vaccine solve this? Maybe, maybe not. Will all teachers get the vaccine? Who knows? And I think we can all agree that teachers are not going to be going back into unsafe workplaces. PPE will be worn by all. Kids are not coming back in full force either. There are thousands in our community working through this pandemic and have been from the start. If they can safely make it happen, then why can't it be done in school? If daycares can do it, why can't schools? If you can hold after school programs all day inside Sherwood schools, why can't students go to actual school? If preschools, private schools, and colleges can be in person, why can't we? Studies have shown COVID doesn't increase in schools, yet why do these studies get ignored? I just read a report about healthcare workers across the US that are declining the vaccine, yet they still show up to work. Healthcare workers are very much at risk, probably more so than teachers. And yes, healthcare workers signed up to help patients, just like teachers signed up to teach children. And no, healthcare workers didn't ask to work in a pandemic type setting. They did so because it's their job. Just like teachers didn't ask to work in a pandemic, but it's here, it's obviously not going away anytime soon. So unless we all hide away in our homes and not see other people, it's not going to go away. So many parents, students, teachers, and the governor are asking for kids to have the choice to return. To keep kids at home when many are already struggling academically is not okay. How many people need to quit their jobs to help their kids? How many kids need to fail, drop out, or just give up? There are safe ways to make it happen. Let's make it clear to teachers that they will have whatever protocols they need to be kept safe, and let's get back into the classroom. Hyperlink included. Christina at 22267 Southwest Timber Crossing Terrace. I'm thankful that the SSD Board of Directors are being thoughtful and strategic in their planning process for potential reopening for our youngest learners. With that said, I am also hopeful that any possible reopening plan takes into account both our teachers and our staff's health and safety. It is my hope that SSD will not reopen without the potential for teachers and staff to have obtained the COVID-19 vaccine as per their preference. With family in the Lake Oswego School District, I am also concerned at what the return to school format may look like. For example, will it vary by grade level as far as in-person hours? Kindergarten at Lake Oswego School District is on a rotating schedule with a Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday schedule and 2.5 hours in the morning or 2.5 hours in the afternoon, with all specials expected to be done at home and reserving Wednesdays for what I would assume would be cleaning. While I, like so many parents, are eager for our kiddos to have the social interaction that school allows, I want to ensure that the thought process is well thought out, well-intentioned, and strategic, which, by the way it looks to be what is currently happening, since we have yet to have any finalized details dates from SSD. So in closing, this is a thank you for your hard work and a concern about the reopening wrapped in one. Thank you.
Kathy Michaud Trad, 22136 Southwest Hall, Sherwood. To the superintendent and school board members, I feel fortunate to be delivering 110 meals to 55 Sherwood families every day in a brand new school bus. I look forward to transporting my students to their schools when it is safe to do so. The district is being pressured to reopen before vaccines for all staff are available. We are all waiting for the updated guidance from ODE and OHA next week, since the COVID-19 cases are rising in Washington County and the surrounding counties. I am a senior citizen and my husband is in the high-risk category. We have followed all the protocols from the CDC, OHA, and our doctors. There was no in-person celebrating for the holidays with our family and my grandson's 3rd birthday. As hard as that was, none of us wanted to take that chance. The recommendations are, if you don't feel comfortable at work, you can telework. First of all, my job is not eligible for that. Secondly, not feeling comfortable doesn't describe what some of us are dealing with. I am tense, disappointed, anxious, frustrated, sad, upset, and scared. Taking an unpaid leave with the probable possibility of losing our health insurance is also unsettling, to say the least. Please keep us all safe until this horrible pandemic is under control and we have some protection with the vaccine. Sarah Larson, 21316 Southwest Simon Terrace, Sherwood. Our community has worked so hard to socially distance, follow the rules, and stay away from COVID. It would be a shame to return to in-person instruction too soon and expose all of the children to COVID. The teachers are doing a great job with distance learning. Let's keep our kids safe.
Mary L.W. Novelli, 21390 Southwest Roy Lake Avenue, Sherwood. Dear Sherwood School District Board of Education, knowing the all too many COVID-19 cases that strangely popped up at SHS when so few persons were actually allowed within the secured walls of the brand new high school, we, a family of just one junior year high school student, cannot fathom one being exposed to the multitudes that could actually enter within the predicted crowded walls of said building if it was opened up to in-school learning this spring. We also know how missing the in-person interactive instructional teaching has negatively impacted many of the students within the district. That being said, we are for the elementary students if and only if they are appropriately and safely spaced and protected appropriately, especially since years of studies have proven that elementary students thrive on socialism and interactive play to learn and grow during their early childhood developmental ages. Hopefully by the fall of 2021, with strong prayer and community support and awareness, Sherwood has realized that staying safely socially distanced from one another and wearing masks and washing hands is the most effective way to provide all of our children success to the road back to in-person school. Thank you for your time, patience, and understanding the Novellis. Jamie Harnell, 16834 Southwest Stellar Drive. If we won't get middle school or high school back in the classroom before spring break, I think it will be more damaging to go back to in-person school this year. Our kids have been at home for a year now. Transitioning to the classroom at the end of the school year would be very hard. Perhaps elementary is more able to do that transition, but I imagine the older kids will struggle. I'm saying this even though I really want my kids back in school and have wanted them in school all along. Marianne Wegner, 11745 Southwest Valencia Lane. I am extremely supportive of reopening the schools. I believe in-person instruction and opportunity for social interaction is very important. Thank you. Michelle Graham, 14554 Southwest Bell Road. If the decision is made that it is safe to return to school, please at least do not have the kids start any earlier than they do. Teddy Swanson, 16254 High Point Drive. Please don't have the kids go back to school for a few hours on multiple days. This would be a disaster for working parents. Full days, 2 days a week would be much more doable. Thanks.
Daniel Burns, 21635 Southwest Cedarbrook Way, Sherwood. With the current metrics as they are, regardless of whether they are advisory or not, or whether they are changed to make it easier to return to in-person learning, it seems incredibly irresponsible to put our children, families, teachers, and community at greater risk by reopening schools at this time. We should not even consider in-person, hybrid, or reopen schools until both teachers and families have been vaccinated, and we are at less than 100 cases per 100,000. There is absolutely no moral or ethical reason to reopen before these two standards are met. I understand how frustrating it is to have our children in online learning. I see the problems and issues, but the risk of even a single child or teacher or their family members getting sick or dying is not worth returning to in-person. Even entertaining such an idea where our students, teachers, families, and communities at risk for potentially spreading COVID is honestly disgusting and shameful. Online learning isn't perfect, but it is working. Saving lives and not contributing to the spread of the virus is far more important. Reopening now is based on impatience and frustration, and no good decisions can be made from that mindset. Set the example to our students that sometimes the moral and ethical or right thing to do is not always what we want to do. Not putting any lives at needless risk and not contributing to the spread of this already out of control virus is the right thing to do. Lindsay Wong, 20025 Southwest Chapman Road. I'm not quite sure why the decision to open school back up is so hard. I've heard that teachers have chose to teach in person while others have decided not to. Parents have also decided if we want our children to come back hybrid or continue to be online for the rest of the school year. Why can't we try it? Teachers that want to teach in person do so, and parents who want their kids to go to school to learn should be able to do so as well. Transportation should be up to parents if they want their kids to go to school if transportation is an issue. Give teachers the proper protective equipment and have them wear it. Parents are responsible to send kids to school healthy. All other professionals have returned with the proper equipment. Everyone must be responsible for oneself and each other.
Lynn Smith, 17544 Southwest Fitch Drive. In an effort to get our kids back to school before the end of the year, could we consider all who would like to attend in-person school are able? All that are high risk or not comfortable continue online. Teachers could stay home and project their classes from a Zoom screen within the physical classroom, unless they feel comfortable in person. Volunteers or monitors can coordinate and enforce standard PPE procedures. Many are considered business essential and are back to work with proper PPE. Education should be considered a #1 priority following elderly and healthcare workers. Matt Fagan, 24091 Southwest Dirtle Drive. I want my children back in school as much as the next family. Distance learning is not even remotely equivalent to in-school instruction from our experience. But this school year has already passed its expiration date. The virus is not subsiding, the numbers show just the opposite. The vaccine is coming, but isn't close to comprehensive coverage. Please do not rush back to salvage this year with a real risk of dramatically increasing spread, especially not when the vaccine, even if not a silver bullet, is right around the corner. I'd like my teachers, coaches, and students to stay safe now and come back in September for a normal school year. Let's not prolong this by prematurely increasing our collective exposure. I am comfortable with our family's ability to mitigate and counter the potential mental health impacts of not sitting in a classroom for this year. We are tougher than we think. Thank you. Lauren Hall, 729 Washington Street, Oregon City, Oregon. I am a social studies teacher at Sherwood High School. I do not feel safe returning to school in person until all staff members have received the COVID vaccine. Reopening schools will undoubtedly expose staff, students, their families, and the larger community to COVID illness and spread. As the vaccine is slowly becoming available, it's unsafe and unnecessary, risky to reopen before all staff are vaccinated. For public health and safety, I urge the board to wait to reopen schools until staff have received the vaccine.
Christopher Weber, 1435 Northeast Irvine Street, McMinnville. I want to begin by thanking you for your time and leadership during this school year. Working in early childhood education for the past 5 years, I understand the detriment to our students' education due to not being in the classroom because of COVID-19. The reduced amount of work, the lack of access to consistent assistance, and the removal of their exposure to hands-on, tangible experiences is going to have a lasting, unwavering impact on their overall development mentally, emotionally, and socially. Recognizing that the potential for health risk when returning to the classroom is all too harsh reality that brings into question whether now is the right time to return to our home away from homes, our schools. I look to the CDC guidelines as reference to my measuring of the plans for risk with hybrid learning, which is measured as some to medium risk dependent on the size of the population being asked to return. This includes cohorting with alternating staggered schedules, minimal mixing of groups of students and teachers during the school day, minimal to no sharing of objects between students and teachers, having students, teachers, and staff follow all steps to protect themselves and others, including use of face masks, social distancing, and hand hygiene, and regularly scheduled and consistent cleaning of frequently touched areas. With appropriate training and curriculum, I can see this being met by the majority of the school community promoting the return to the school setting. However, I would also like to represent an ever-present and important aspect of the community, which is students involved in our special needs program. From my years of experience in this field, I find the ability to remediate these risks unable to be met. This is a position that will not be able to meet the protect themselves and other guidelines, that of wearing a mask, social distancing, and hand hygiene. The majority of our work is being in close proximity with students in order for them to focus on our work for the day. We are sync trained, which includes close proximity strategies to protect ourselves and others in the school setting if the time comes for de-escalation, and asking a student in this population to consistently wear a mask seems almost impossible. Before I return to the school building, I would like firm training and guidelines that can guarantee the safety of the stakeholders involved in the school community when working with students in special programs. Everyone involved in special programs should not be forgotten. These students deserve an education. These students and staff deserve protections. Every child is a different kind of flower that altogether make this world a beautiful garden. I'm excited for the day we can all return to school safely. However, we need to think of the whole when looking to reopening our schools. Julie Cummins, 15815 Southwest Willow Drive. It is important that we open the schools immediately. Our students are not only suffering academically through distance learning, but they are also suffering socially and emotionally due to the lack of peer interactions that in-person education provides. Before distance learning was implemented, we were told as parents that we should limit screen time of our children for a multitude of reasons. Now, the only way that they can stay in public education is to be on screens for 6 hours a day. Children do not have the attention span to stay focused through a screen. I have personally seen my children struggle to stay focused and engaged while doing distance learning. Distance learning does not work for all students. For those concerned about opening schools too quickly, there is the Sherwood Cloud campus that they can have their children continue with distance learning. But for those of us who would like to send our kids to in-person public school, we currently do not have that option. Please make in-person learning an available option for all grade levels.
Emma Starling, 24006 Southwest Aspen Lakes Drive, Sherwood. I believe that us students should be able to get a proper education from our teachers. Making us sit at home while other bigger school districts are back at school, such as Lake Oswego, is unfair to our futures and ourselves in the moment. The teachers in Sherwood believe in us and want us to succeed, but do you, the school board, want us to? Because it has taken too long for any actions to be taken. We should have our choice to choose. If we want, we should be able to go to school and get a proper education that we deserve. I have learned nothing from online school. Sure, my grades might show I am doing fine, but I do not understand my classes. The last thing our generation needs right now is less or improper education. People say we are going to change the world, but how can we if we don't even have a solid high school education? In order for us to not repeat history, we need to know history, so open the doors to our school and let us learn for goodness sake. I know I'm not the only one feeling this way. Also, not to mention this little detail, the public school system doesn't care about called mental health and emotional well-being of students. But I know even if I talk about it, nothing is going to get done anyways, so why even bother? A concerned student, class of 2023. Laura Fullweiler, 16861 Southwest Holly Farms Lane. Dear Sherwood School Board, please do not overlook our middle and high school students when reopening schools. To say that our kids are safer at home is trading the very tiny risk of dying from COVID for an infinite number of other risks, including anxiety, loneliness, and suicide. These kids need real-world experiences, and to continue to mandate and subject them to screens and a virtual world is irresponsible and short-sighted. These kids can follow the rules of masks and good hygiene, and of course, those that wish to stay home can. Please grant them their right to attend school as soon as the elementary kids are able. They will be adults sooner and need to reacclimate to real social engagement. Thank you for listening. Heather Pierce, 17349 Southwest Galewood Drive, Sherwood. Ladies and gentlemen of the board, when I enrolled my children in the hybrid model, it was with the understanding that state metrics would determine when schools could transition students back to the building for in-person instruction. At that time, for students in grades K through 3 to be able to attend in person, case rates in Washington County must be below 30 per 100,000 people, and the test positivity rate must be below 5% for both the county and the state. For all students to return, case rates in Washington County must be below 10 per 100,000. All of those metrics must be met for 3 consecutive weeks. I know these metrics have changed throughout the year and now are advisory only. But the original intent was clear. Schools are safe when the community is safe. With cases at peak levels, how can reopening be safe? You should wait to reopen schools until at least high-risk family and community members can be protected against the virus. While teachers may be getting vaccinated, their students and families are not. If you truly believe it is safe to reopen, then I challenge you all to skip the vaccine and share the risk you are asking us to take on. Anything less is hypocrisy. Students can recover from some lost instructional time, but they will never recover from the death of a parent or a grandparent, of knowing that they brought death home with them from school, a death that you have the means to prevent. If you insist on reopening, please wait until the end of the grading period when families no longer comfortable with the idea of returning to in-person school can choose to commit to the Sherwood Cloud campus for the remainder of the year. Thank you for your time.
Morgan Lucio, 23410 Southwest Redfern Place, Sherwood. First and foremost, I would like to thank each of the board members of our Sherwood School District who has worked on making challenging yet educated decisions during this extraordinary time. Second, and for every inch of my heart, I must thank each and every teacher who has tirelessly redefined the word dedication. We are all indebted to you. I am the PAC president at Archer Glen Elementary, and it is my honor to bring resources and support to students, teachers, and staff so they may excel academically and personally. And just like everyone else, I miss life before March 2020. My personal feelings, however, are muted by my greater concern for returning to school. First and foremost, children thrive from consistency. If we were to open schools, there's no guarantee that children will be given that consistency. There will inevitably be outbreaks that will send the cohorts pods, or classes into 2-week quarantines and force our young students to readapt to distance learning once more, only to have to switch back once they are given the all clear. In addition, since we are looking at only sending back kindergarten through third graders, this means some students will have to return to school without their teacher. Yes, teachers with older children will have to prioritize their family over their beloved career and students. So not only are we asking our children to forego consistency once more this year, but we are forcing our teachers who are parents to make an unfathomable choice. This is not okay. Another concern I have in returning to school is the safety of teachers and staff. It is likely you are reading this in a socially distanced meeting, hearing it on Zoom or on a YouTube channel, because it's not safe to do so in person. And if it's not safe enough for you to conduct this community forum in person, it should not be acceptable to send teachers and staff into harm's way when there is a perfectly safe and consistent means for them to teach their students and or not give up their career. And while we may be on the verge of vaccination, no school should open without their teacher and staff being completely vaccinated. Asking them to return to work beforehand is undeniably putting the cart before the horse and once again showing teachers that they are important enough to help raise our children, but not valued enough to keep them safe. And last, it is the end of January. There are 4 months remaining in this school year. At what point do you call a spade and simply focus on returning to school safely in the fall? If the metrics cannot be met today, I think it would be better to make a final decision that distance learning be the platform for the remainder of the year so that parents, caregivers, teachers, staff, and students can set their expectations and know how their lives will be constructed for the months to come. Thank you for your hearing my concerns. Thank you again for all that you do for the community. And thank you to each and every teacher, staff, and principal who's out there making a difference, even Ryan Weller, 15621 Southwest Bowman Court. Why is the proposal to send K3 back first? Does it make sense to start with the high school to set best practices in one school with more experienced students? John Sutton, 23329 Southwest Shirk Place, Sherwood. I'm an 8th grade student and I believe I should be able to go back to school in the classroom. The people who don't want their kids to go back to school have the option to keep their kids at home. Cloud learning is a valid option. But the people who want their kids to be back in the classroom shouldn't be held back from that. Our governor finally gave us the opportunity to go back to school, so we should use this blessing to go back.
Amanda Mulder, 20559 Southwest Duck Ridge Place. I would really love to see school reopen. My first grader is really missing school. She has been doing her distance learning at Champion since school started. We have had 0 issues or exposures, and it's been very safe. All the kids are great at wearing their masks and giving space. I understand it's important to get teachers vaccinated too. I do want to thank all the staff for all of the hard work they are putting into distance learning because they really are doing an amazing job. Megan Pashalik Gomez, 15826 Southwest Sunset Court. School board members, I have 2 kids in our district in 2nd and 7th grade. The teachers have made their best effort, but we desperately need to get all of the kids back to in-person school. The Zoom school is not nearly the same, and the children are truly suffering both emotionally and academically. Now that teachers have been bumped up in line for the vaccines, there is no reason at all to not make it an option for return of the kids to school. If some parents are not comfortable with that, then they can join the cloud campus until the fall, when hopefully all the kids can be vaccinated too and all schools fully reopen. Thank you for your time and service on the board. Brenda Selby, 17289 Southwest Galewood Drive. I know the metrics have been changed and we will likely be returning to in-person learning this school year. As an educator myself, I know that in-person learning under typical circumstances is optimal for students. However, I urge you to be very clear and honest with parents that this return to in-person learning will look very different. Educators know that school will look nothing like the normal so that many parents are wanting so many parents are wanting and expecting. Parents should know what they are choosing if they opt for the hybrid model. Out of respect for all students and staff, things will have to look very different. For example, number one, parents will carry an extra burden to keep even their mildly ill children home from school so that entire cohorts of students and staff aren't quarantined repeatedly. Will this be inconvenient? Probably, but it will be their responsibility. Number two, parents cannot send children to school when a family member is ill and may possibly have COVID. That also puts entire cohorts at risk. Is this inconvenient for them? Yes, but it will be their responsibility. Number three, students will not be mingling with peers during the day, or for that matter, even leaving their designated space in the classroom. Number four, there will be no cooperative learning, sharing of materials, or having a teacher sit right next to you for support. Number five, everyone will be wearing masks all day. Additionally, I ask that the district please avoid rushing back before the staff have had the opportunity to be fully vaccinated. If the district ends up with sick teachers and staff, including transportation, that will make this school year even more challenging and inconsistent for students. I also hope the district is looking at data on the new variant of COVID-19 that has shut down schools in other countries again. It appears to spread more easily and is resulting in increased child hospitalizations. We are predicted to have this variant spreading widely here in the coming months. Is it wise to put our children at this level of risk with no vaccine available for them? I realize this is a highly complex situation, and I sincerely hope the district makes decisions based on science and data rather than emotions.
Aurora Schaefer, 1252 Southwest 2th Road, Sherwood. I do not support reopening schools until teachers have the opportunity to be fully vaccinated. Hallie Schweigert, 22808 Southwest Forest Creek Drive, Sherwood. I would love to go back to school full time, but I feel like that would not be considered smart right now. If we were to go back to school right now with COVID-19 still all over the place, more people would get infected. Before any students go back, all teachers should be required to have received the COVID-19 shot so that way there is less chance of them getting it and spreading it to the students in the building. Samuel Roeder, 2901 East 2nd Street, Newburgh. Sherwood School District Board, I'm writing on behalf of my fellow colleagues at Middleton and myself. This is in regards to our current teaching environment and what the future holds for us. To start, we feel that there is an underserved population that hasn't been taken into consideration in a model for in-person instruction. Special education includes students that require some special considerations. To provide some examples of what we'll experience, behavior students who will remove masks not just from themselves, but attempt to remove them from staff. Spitting and biting of students. Emotional needs where a student needs physical contact from a staff member. Flight or elopement and how to keep the student safe. Additional guidelines for instructional assistance provided by special education support staff to include how close we can be to a student, options for movement, stretching breaks, and physical assistance of lifting, toileting of students. This leads into concerns from this group of staff. We're concerned about returning to in-person instruction prior to vaccination availability to all staff. Provisions on how to address needs or behavior students, including emotional support and safety precautions. Also, proper protective equipment for staff who are required to interact with students that might observe additional hazards. With the current distance learning model, we know this is not the best model for some of our students. However, until all of the aforementioned concerns can be addressed, it is currently a better model than returning to in-person instruction. To understand this perspective, special education staff will be required to take on a very dangerous and unnecessary risk that just requires time to resolve. The most important aspect is vaccination for all staff who choose to receive it. Speaking personally, I've already inquired and confirmed that I do not qualify for a vaccine yet unless the district provides some form of documentation that can be taken to a physician outside of my primary health insurance or offered by the district through a clinic. Secondary is ensuring that there is the lowest possibility of transmission to anyone in the district. During this pandemic, we have had persons contract COVID-19, over 10% of the special education population at our school alone, which would have been much higher with in-person instruction as staff was not near affected students. We're following this process closely as we miss the in-person interactions with our students. However, we hope that our group of students and staff are considered and addressed in any future discussion of in-person instruction. Signed by Stanley Roeder, Valerie Potter, Diane Johnson, Gigi Mooney, Shireen Gutierrez, Casey Glenn, Tanya Camletti, Dina Francis, and Senna Leon.
Michelle Tavia and Stephen Crow, 15572 Southwest High Point Drive, Sherwood. To the Sherwood School District School Board. First, we would like to thank you for all your hard work in making decisions for our schools, especially during these challenging and unprecedented times. As schools now have liability coverage, and Governor Brown has charged each school district with making the decision about in-person instruction, we realize there is a lot of pressure to begin in-person school. We are parents of a third grader at Archer Glen Elementary. This past summer, we chose CDL hybrid because we know it was most important for our daughter to be with a teacher and be part of a class from Archer Glen. A key ingredient to her education is to continue that feeling of belonging and being connected to her friends and school community. She loves her teachers. Some studies suggest that schools are not significant sources of transmission, and some health researchers have said that students, particularly children up to third grade, are a relatively low risk. However, going back to school doesn't solely involve students. What about educators that are older, have underlying conditions, or multi-generational families? Their career should not be on the line for this. Let's be honest, everyone wants kids back in school and to be normal again. Teachers love their students and want to be back in the classroom with them. Unfortunately, it's still not safe, and being in the classroom now will be anything but normal. We know that there will inevitably be outbreaks. Think about how many people would be affected and how disruptive it would be to go back and forth from in-person to online instruction. With the vaccine at our doorstep, it is safest to wait until teachers and other adults are able to get fully vaccinated. Prior to that just doesn't seem like the right time to expand people's social bubbles. We understand educators have priority in the vaccine plan. Despite everyone's best efforts for a swift rollout, we have already experienced unforeseeable delays, and as of now, the situation can change by the day. Furthermore, the virus itself continues to evolve. Does the updated guidance take this more easily transmissible variant into consideration? Let's not make a huge mistake with people's lives. We realize that not all children and families are as fortunate as ours, and there are serious issues at hand. But at this point, we urge you to consider how to safely get additional assistance and resources to those children and families who are struggling, rather than putting additional lives at risk. Let's keep our teachers safe and help them maintain stability and continuity for their students. Let's listen to families and students' specific needs and offer more focused support through innovative problem solving and compassionate leadership. In conclusion, we ask you to consider making a final decision that distance learning be the platform
Jessica Croft, 15135 Southwest Work Court. I strongly urge the school board to delay opening schools until more is known about the vaccine's availability and its effectiveness in preventing transmission of COVID-19. To open schools to students now in any capacity will cause more trauma and unpredictability to our children and their families. We can all agree that this has been a very difficult year for all, especially our kids. My kindergartner's entire world has been turned upside down, and she has suffered emotionally, socially, and academically. However, opening schools to students now will likely result in a COVID-19 outbreak in our community, putting human lives at risk. It would also ask our kids to endure yet another change just when they are getting used to the status quo. Furthermore, should students need to return to distance learning, they will be forced to endure and adapt to yet another change. This puts emotional, physical, and financial strain on students and families when they have to constantly readjust to new situations. I know that distance learning is far from ideal. There are many days it is quite miserable for our household. However, I think dangling the carrot of in-person school and then taking it away would make distance learning even more difficult and even less effective. I believe it is important to open schools as soon as it is safe. Now is not the time. Given the current number of COVID-19 cases and the limited availability of the vaccine, I strongly urge the school board to wait until more concrete information is available and more students and families can access the vaccine. It would be irresponsible to expose those vulnerable to COVID-19, many of which are students' primary or secondary caregivers and even siblings, by way of allowing students back in the schools too soon. I believe it would be better for all to wait until there is a greater certainty that once schools are open to students, they will be open for good. Thank you. Hayden Price, 18370, Southwest 135th Terrace, Tualatin. I have very little motivation in online school. My grades have dropped, and it is lonely not seeing my friends. Mark Bednarski, 15830 Southwest Bowman Lane, Sherwood. Please enable teachers and parents to make their own decision. If the teacher is fine to go back to school physically, please let them make that decision based on their own risk assessment. They may or may not consider themselves being at higher or lower risk. Please enable parents to make their own decisions for their child to go back physically if the teacher returns. Forcing beliefs and opinions on others is a great concern. We should teach our children how to peacefully coexist and that people can have different points of view.
Shannon Miller, 22718 Southwest Martin Court, Sherwood. Good evening. Thank you so much, board members and administrators, for your dedication to Sherwood families during this challenging time. I can only imagine the sacrifices you have made and the toll it has taken. I am so grateful for your service to our community. I'm a parent and educator in Sherwood. I love this town. I love our schools. I love our community. I have 2 children, one in elementary and one in middle, and I work in the district. I ask that as you make your decisions, you please prioritize science and safety over emotion and pressure. One of my children is medically vulnerable to COVID complications. If I have to go back into school buildings before it is safe to do so, I will be exposed and expose my family to a deadly disease that will certainly have serious and long-term effects on us. I am beginning to fear that I will soon have to choose between keeping my child safe and paying my bills and maintaining my career and standing in the district. I understand the toll this COVID life has taken on our youth. We feel it deeply in our household, but I do not think that hours behind masks and plexiglass and no true interaction with peers and staff will make that better. I suspect for many it will make it worse. Further, I do not believe that it is entirely our school staff's responsibility to maintain the social emotional well-being of my children. It's mine as their parents. It's my responsibility to love them and nurture them and support them. It's really, really hard right now, but that's the job. That's parenting. We have been so fortunate as to have so many incredible teachers and staff members in our lives. Many of my children's teachers have become our dear friends and love my kids fiercely. Their current teachers and support staff are doing a phenomenal job of educating and caring for my children. From their empty classrooms and dining room tables, I see the dedication and love pouring out of them. My kids feel seen and known, and they are learning even in this wild time. Distance learning is far from ideal, but the school staff is doing an incredible job. I know my kids matter to them, and I want them to know that their lives matter to us. I'm acutely aware that we are fortunate in many ways, and many families are not seen and felt and known. Many families are not able to provide the safety and security that is needed in a home. As an educator of 20 years, I have seen and felt and known so much of that, and it needs to be considered. But I do not believe that sending every child and staff member back into classrooms when it is not yet safe to do so is the answer. At the last board meeting, I heard many times that staff who don't feel comfortable going in can just stay home. Unfortunately, that is not an option for a great many of us, as the upper grade levels do not have a cloud campus, so many positions
Lynn Berry, 21715 Southwest Aldrich Terrace, Sherwood, submitted an article from the Wall Street Journal, January 16th, 2021. That article will be submitted to the record. Justin Kai, 22118 Southwest Friars Lane, Sherwood. Regarding the most recent January 6th Sherwood School District Board meeting, I was shocked and horrified to witness the school board actually meeting in person during this pandemic before everyone in our community has been vaccinated. To do that, I fully expect residents, goldfish, and grandparents all across Sherwood will now die. Please forgive my inflammatory opening comments. I make them to prove the point that inane comments of such nature do nothing to benefit our community, and I hope that we recognize such comments as nothing more than fear-mongering that do more harm than good. Obviously, the Sherwood School Board met in a manner consistent with all the necessary safety protocols in place to ensure the safety of all those present and to minimize the risk of COVID-19 transmission. Clearly, when schools resume in-person instruction, which could take various forms such as hybrid, tiered, or as a choice between online or in-person, it can be done so in the same manner, safely following all necessary and recommended safety protocols to protect teachers, staff, and students alike, with or without vaccines. This is not a binary issue that requires us to either remain in lockdown or all suffer our deaths in any amount of reopening occurs. Personally, I would like to see our government and educational institutions stand behind the scientifically proven effectiveness of vaccines and mandate their usage for all, especially due to this current ordeal, except for those who are medically compromised. As institutions dedicated to education, it's paramount that we stand with science versus pseudoscience and fact versus belief. While I strongly believe in and advocate for vaccines, it's clear that without mandating their usage comprehensively, waiting for vaccines will serve no purpose and will only prolong the adverse effects of distance learning upon our students, families, and community. Vaccine rollout nationwide has fallen far short of hopes and expectations. Waiting until we achieve herd immunity will be waiting destructively and unnecessarily with no end in sight. I implore our school board to cautiously listen to the Oregon Department of Education's updated January 19th metrics for schools reopening, allowing at minimum our youngest learners to return to in-person instruction as soon as possible, as they are the most manageable under pandemic conditions, have the least ability to learn through screens and distance learning, and are subsequently suffering the most because of it. As ODE and our governor have made clear, schools are not super spreader events with the proper safety protocols in place, and it is of utmost importance that at minimum our youngest learners and their families have the choice and ability to return to in-person instruction. Thank you for your consideration and your service.
Daniel Bantz, 14762 Southwest Smock Street, Sherwood. Regarding reopening, unless our local school district risk data for our relevant demographics clearly suggest otherwise, I would like to see us resume on-site schooling to the greatest normal extent allowed as soon as possible. Mike Lambert, 14874 Southwest Kenton Drive, Tigard, Oregon. With safety at the forefront of planning and the potential long-term health impacts of a COVID infection becoming known, it is important for staff to have the option to receive a full vaccination if they choose before entering a setting with higher potential of exposure to the virus. Jared Jones, 214 West 4th Street, Newburgh, Oregon. As a Sherwood High School teacher, I know all SSD staff have been doing unprecedented work in the past 10 months to make distance learning as good as possible. We all long for the day when we will turn off Zoom and meet face to face, and we ache knowing how our students are struggling. The sacrifices we have all made have been hard, but we know that without them, the pandemic would have been even worse. 5 days from now, K-12 staff will be eligible for vaccination in Oregon. Finding and getting the vaccine may take a bit longer, and the 3-week wait between shots, plus the few days for the vaccine to take effect, are frustratingly long. But compared to the 10 months behind us, those few weeks are a finite passage full of hope. I have colleagues in the elementary schools who received word today that they will be expected to receive students back in their buildings in person on February 15th. That is just 21 days after the date on which they will first be eligible to receive the vaccine. In the best case scenario, this would be the very day that they would need to go for their second shot of the vaccine and several days before full protection. It may take longer if vaccines prove hard to access. Some of these staff members have pre-existing health conditions that would put their lives at extraordinary risk if they were to contract COVID. These are individuals who have been extremely careful over the past 10 months. This calendar for reopening would force those staff members to choose either to risk their lives or give up a part of their livelihood. I have two requests of the school board tonight. Number one, delay the opening of schools just another few days. Start the clock when all staff concerned have had a real and reasonable opportunity to access vaccines. That will give the district 24 to 28 days to plan for reopening for K-3 while staff members complete the vaccination process. Number two, if that is not possible, provide additional leave for K-3 staff so they do not have to use their own leave time due to scheduling decisions beyond their control during a pandemic. The pandemic is raging. We are so close to the goal of vaccination. Why stop a few steps short of the finish line? Whose life is worth that risk? Thank you for your time. Riley Odom, 20744 Southwest Trailblazer Place. I believe we should be able to go back to school. This year, I'm a freshman, and although I appreciate the efforts of the Sherwood School District has done, this is not a one-size-fits-all solution. My brother, a sixth grader, has ADHD, and there's daily meltdowns. It has affected not only him, but others in our family, just trying to help him, spending time and energy trying. I think families should get to choose whether they want their kids back to school. However, I think it's crucial there is an option. Not only for kids that need more help and support from our teachers, but kids that also struggle with mental health. Other states have been able to get their students back in school safely with precautions and very little trouble. I think it's time we start pushing things forward. We have to take in account both sides. We need to keep more at-risk people safe, but also start taking into account students who have just as much of a need to go back to school. Riley Odom, 20744 Southwest Trailblazer Place. Oh, I apologize, that is a duplicate entry. We will skip the duplicate. Sarah Bittner, 29330 Southwest Lad Hill Road, Sherwood. Sherwood is a very special place, and our children are the very heartbeat of our community. Our schools and teachers are top-notch. Unfortunately, during this unprecedented time, our community's heartbeat, our kids, is being extinguished. I have two high schoolers, one middle schooler, and one elementary student, and have seen CDL play out in each level of schooling. My fear is that our students are not grasping the concepts necessary to build upon in the following year. Our students are falling behind the rest of the country, as most schools around the country have figured out how to keep staff and students safe while providing quality in-person instruction. I know our teachers are working overtime trying to make the best of CDL, but there is a reason why this model has not been implemented before now. It is no substitute for the top-notch instruction our students deserve, and it doesn't work. It is time to allow kids to return to the classroom. Thank you for your commitment to these kids. Now let's show them that we are committed to their futures and get them back in our amazing schools. Lindsay Hawkins, 23351 Southwest Green Gate Place, Sherwood. Has the district considered postponing a return till after spring break to allow for an increase in both vaccinations and herd immunity, as there will be limited classroom instruction due to the transition period to allow for in-person instruction? As a teacher in the district, several of my peers have asked for guidance on issues about safely returning to school. There are several issues in which we have no clear guidance and are concerned that we will be placing both ourselves and our students' families at risk by returning too soon. Megan Karekis, 15630 Southwest Farmer Way. I have 3 kids in the Sherwood School District. They are 13, 10, and 6. We moved here at the beginning of the school year and have yet to have the chance to make any friends. I can see my kids suffering both academically and socially since the school shut down last year. My 6-year-old is way behind in 1st grade. We asked that he be held back in kindergarten and they refused. He is now even further behind and also frustrated at not willing to learn because he knows how far behind he is. My 10-year-old has ADHD and struggles to stay focused on a computer. He is doing his best, anything who's paying attention to the teacher, but is behind in all of his assignments, and I frequently get emails from his teacher stating that he is not looking at the screen when his camera is on. My 13-year-old is suffering most psychologically. She is depressed and misses her friends. She is typically and always has been a grand honor roll student, and this year she is failing almost all of her classes. My husband and I both work full-time and cannot be home with them all the time to supervise. We are not just asking but begging for the schools to open, not just for academic reasons, but for mental health reasons as well. Our youth are in a dire situation and they need us to help them. Thank you for your consideration and all of the hard work Thank you for your consideration in all of the hard work you're putting into this. Eric Flister, 22206 Southwest Bashong Terrace, Sherwood. The public has jumped to the conclusion we are also desperate to believe that schools can open safely. Preliminary studies did support this hope, as case rates did not dramatically increase for the first 6 weeks after schools opened in many areas this autumn. The studies always emphasized that they were optimized for speed rather than quality, so their conclusions were weak and only applied to communities with case rates lower than Sherwood's. This was consistently left out of media reports, but beginning in November, case rates have more than tripled across the US and Europe. 6 studies published in the most respected journals, Science, Nature, JAMA, and The Lancet, as well as the UK Scientific Advisory Group for Emergencies. Since then, have comprehensively compared infection spread in communities that opened schools to those that did not. They arrive at a definitive consensus. The November surge provided the clear signal that open schools are central to community transmission. Yesterday, ODE listed the scientific publications that informed their revised guidance. None of the studies cited included data after October. That leaves out more than half of the cases and deaths in the US and Europe, the period most relevant to understanding the impact of open schools. Moreover, they systematically failed to cite at least 2 high-profile studies published in JAMA and Science before October, which established that school closures can reduce peak incidence by 40 to 60%, and states that closed schools earlier had the greatest relative reduction in incidence and mortality. The most recent comprehensive literature review published 2 weeks ago concludes school closures are the most effective policy option for preventing COVID spread in the community. Locales that open schools based on pre-November data have since had their largest spikes in cases and deaths. The worst outbreak in the world is in the UK, where schools opened in autumn. They have now reclosed schools. ODE cites no studies that include data since the B117 variant was detected, estimated to be 50% more contagious across all ages and expected to dominate US cases in the coming months. They cite no studies of schools in communities with COVID infection rates as high as Sherwood is now. All published studies agree that schools cannot safely open at Sherwood's current rates. Critically, ODE's new thresholds have no basis in published scientific literature. They are higher than most lenient published thresholds, above which open schools increase community spread. I have submitted to the board a detailed written document summarizing and linking to these studies, also available to the public via our petition update at change.org. And that concludes public comment.
All right, thanks again for a stellar job in reading through those. I appreciate it, and I really appreciate everyone who submitted those comments. There's a lot of passion and a lot of thought that has gone into all of this. Now comes the hard part, and I think as after the comments last time, it's pretty clear that what we have in front of us are a lot of bad choices. And that's really been the theme of the pandemic throughout. And whether you're talking about it in an educational setting or a work setting or policy choices, pandemics are awful things, and they put people in awful positions, and they wear on people. and people's frustrations go up. And we're certainly in that place, not just around in-person education, but on all kinds of topics. What I'd like to do is maybe make I could probably go on and talk about this for 2 hours, but I'd like to make a few observations, and then back to the idea of principles, kind of give you an idea of what I'm thinking about in terms of what some principles are or would be. First, in terms of observations, this is probably blindingly obvious, but kids being in school is, at the end of the day, really important. At the beginning of the pandemic, we actually tried to keep schools open initially because of that value. And you've heard over and over in these comments, and there's all kinds of data galore to support the physical health, the emotional and mental health, all of the benefits of being in school that our parents and our teachers and our community can see happening with kids today. So some plan toward getting us back in school, I think, is really important. The last commenter notwithstanding, I believe the revised metrics are in fact science-based. They follow guidelines developed by Harvard Global Health, which have been updated over time, and they're consistent with what we see for successful reopening in other parts of the country and world that are not maybe quite so cavalier as some other places have been around these kinds of issues. To the question of data about schools, we've heard lots of people or heard comments that sort of categorically state what the data says or doesn't say. And I think they're all overstatements of what the data says. Honestly, at the end of the day, I think what the data says is schools are reflective of the amount of coronavirus in a community. If there's a lot of coronavirus in the community, there'll be school outbreaks, and if there's not a lot of coronavirus in the community, there will be fewer and they'll be easier to contain. And ultimately, even through the current holiday surge, Oregon continues to be a stellar performer in terms of the amount of COVID in the community. We have the 4th lowest case rate in the country. We have the 5th lowest fatality rate in the country. And that's due to all of us as a community coming together and doing the things that we know we need to do around wearing masks and washing hands and not having large social gatherings. Our Thanksgiving and Christmas increases appear to have really demonstrated people really listening to that. Maybe for the first time in the pandemic, they seem to have been smaller and shorter in duration, and we seem to now be coming out of what would be the kind of the New Year's peak of cases. I said Thanksgiving and Christmas. I should have said Christmas and New Year's. So I think that's what we know from the data around schools. The vaccines that are out there right now are incredibly effective. We also know that, and they are incredibly effective at a first dose. So effective at a first dose that there's live discussion going on at a national level of should we stop giving the second dose in favor of giving everybody a first dose because of the effectiveness of it. And I think that's really important to bear in mind. We also know that the guidance in Ready Schools, Safe Learners works. We see that guidance in various kinds of forms used in all sorts of workplaces that have had people at work in close contact with people who potentially have coronavirus. You see it, don't think about hospitals, but think about all kinds of other medical clinics, dental offices, hair salons, places where people are in close contact with each other. And because of good use of those, of masks particularly, we've been able to see those kinds of workplaces operate without significant outbreaks. And then I guess the last point to make, 2 points to make. I do have questions about how quickly we'll be able to get our staff vaccinated. It's going to depend on the prioritization schemes that get set up, and I don't have enough visibility into that. But I do think it's important that we get to a place where staff have had the opportunity for the first vaccine, for the first dose of vaccine and the 2-week period for effectiveness. And as I sit here today, one of the commenters observed that 3 weeks was, the 15th is exactly 3 weeks out from that point. And I think that's right. And for that reason, I think the 15th of February timeline is too aggressive. I think we need to be able to actually see the pace at which people are getting vaccinated. So with those observations, I guess the principles that I would lay out as the ones that I think we need to follow in making this decision are, first, even though the new metrics are discretionary and we can, in theory, go do whatever we want, I think we need to meet those metrics. That they are sound, they're science-based, they're comparable to metrics used in state of Washington, put out by CDC, and I think they need to be followed. Second, I think we need to know we're not in a surge. Being at the technical level of the metrics, but being on our way up in cases, I think would be foolish. And so I think we need to know that we have worked our way out of the increase in cases over the holidays. As I said a minute ago, I think the preliminary signs are that's happening now, and the trends are good. But I would want to see a little bit more data. And then, as I just alluded, I think we need to make sure staff have got access to the first dose of the vaccine in the 2-week period for full effectiveness. So that's kind of where my head is at. I've got some other thoughts about sort of process going forward from here, but maybe I'll stop talking for a minute and see what my fellow board members are thinking.
Pat, this is Jessica. I think I agree with all of those and think that that's absolutely right. I have felt all the way along we need to be following metrics that are based in science. These are not random metrics. These are metrics, as Mr. Bennett indicated, that have been developed in part with the Harvard Global Public Health Institute. That is a set of folks who know what they're doing and who are looking at this data closely. I think the other thing that's really clear is that there is no action that we can take that is going to make everyone happy. We are going to move way too fast for some people and way too slow for others. And I think at this moment, I think we need to really ask our community for grace and for kindness, for understanding, and to ask people to demonstrate that for their kids. I know it's really hard. It's really hard when you're looking at a situation and there's a ton of fear. I think we need to do everything we can to extend to each other. Again, not to me or to fellow board members really, but to teachers, to school administrators who are doing everything they can to absorb the information and make the best decisions they can to keep people safe and return people to school, and recognize that that may not happen on a timetable that you would prefer, but we're gonna, because it may be too fast or too slow, but we're gonna try and be deliberate and thoughtful. Two additional, or at least, two additional principles I would like to put forward is one, I think we need to try our best to minimize mid-year disruption. And at the same time, allow for maximum flexibility for people to be, if you're in hybrid right now and you want to be in the cloud campus, to be able to make those changes so that we are able to accommodate as many people as possible who would want to move their kids to cloud campus or who want their kids to come back to school, and recognizing that those are competing goods. Really looking closely at what federal funding that might come or other resources we might have to be able to try and bridge some gaps where we can, but really trying to honor the relationships that have been built so that there isn't mass disruption for every student, but also accommodate requests to move to the cloud campus. So for those that really feel like this is, they can't send their kid back to school, that they can continue to be part of the Sherwood community and receive a public education through our district. The other component that we really heard a lot about at the last set of public comment, we heard from our partners in the associations that I really think ought to be a principle of ours moving forward is that we really need to call on the community to engage in the same way that I've ask our community to be kind. I think we also need to ask our community to engage that this is a community effort. And that means that we all embrace the public health principles together as a measure of trying to get back to school. The social distancing, the responsibility, the personal responsibility that comes with trying to get us back also requires us to, not have slumber parties and try our best to, wear masks. And when our kids gather, make sure that they're wearing masks and keeping social distance and doing all of those things. And I think that's got to be part of what we do as a school board and district, is encourage and call our community to action to help make this return to school safe and possible throughout the rest of the pandemic.
Thanks, Jessica. Who else?
I guess I'd like to concur with what Chair Allen was saying earlier, and it was good information to find out about the effectiveness of the first dose of the vaccine. That was new news to me. And along those same lines, I think that we are getting hit with a lot of people are being hit with a lot of new information over the last few days, and I think we kind of develop our opinions over time and based on information that we have. And then as we get new information, it just takes a little bit of time to kind of process our thoughts. And I think that's kind of a lot of what's happening here. We just had this new guidance come out. I do have a lot of confidence in the background and where it came from, and we need to adhere to this. And I think with most things that do with science is, as we get more data and we get more time, our understanding of the issue tends to evolve over time. And I think we just kind of had a big change in our metrics, and it's going to take a little time for people to process this. And the other kind of note that I had here was just kind of to echo what Dr. Adamson said at the end, and but also what Chair Allen said, was that this really is a community effort. I mean, we need people to wear masks, keep your groups small. If your kid has the sniffles, if you have any doubt at all, keep them home. And this is really something that we're all going to have to kind of get around and get behind and kind of look out for each other. And I kind of look back on where we were in August and how when we kind of had those kind of little surges in the middle of summer, and we knew the school year was starting up in the fall, and you could see it in the numbers, you could see it in the community, you could see it how people interacted with each other. It's like we need to do what we can to drive this down, and mask wearing, I know, went up. And if it wasn't for those pesky little wildfires, I think we would have done much better. But I think we do have the ability to do this. It's going to take a community effort, and as a district, I think we need to kind of look at the latest metrics and move forward with that. I do think it's the dates that were originally proposed are probably a little aggressive by a week or so for my taste. I think just could allow that processing time, allow us to get a little more information on that first dose of the vaccine.
Thanks, Eric. Sue or Mike?
I also want to thank you. Those principles were very informative, especially it's echoing Eric there, the first vaccine plus the 2 weeks. That's good information to have, the effectiveness of that. I also want to make a comment about the prioritization. I know it's frustrating for parents with older kids, but the prioritization for K through 3 is due to the impact that it has on them, and it's simpler it's safer to open those grades first, because the cohorting is easier. It is the place to start. to reopen. And I know there's been a lot of comments, open all schools now, but we are putting the priority where it needs to be.
Thanks, Mike. Sue?
Yeah, so I have to say that the news on the first vaccine and its effectiveness is about the first good news I've heard in a long time. So thank you for that. That's very encouraging because frankly, sitting here and kind of doing the time frame math of one vaccine and waiting and then another 14 days puts us at the end of the school year. And, you know, we just can't afford to keep waiting and waiting if we have the opportunity to move ahead safely and in a productive manner for our entire Sherwood education community. You know, I think, you know, as we look back, I still honestly can't believe that on March 13th, these kids left school and they haven't been back since. I don't know. I certainly didn't see that coming. I didn't understand it. I still don't know how, frankly, we got to today. And as a board member, it's been incredibly frustrating, like the rest of the world, to have no ability to make any type of decision regarding Sherwood and students and teachers and what we're supposed to be doing. And then to have a surprise, and frankly, it was a surprise, to have an announcement by the governor when schools are closed for the winter holidays is a surprise and really difficult for everyone involved that thought they were going to, you know, have some time to suddenly turn. And here we are today, less than a month later, talking about an incredible amount of work that's been done to do what we can to keep everybody safe, to move forward with the steps that we're finally allowed to decide about. I mean, as I think about the principles that are important to me, we have the opportunity to bring K-3 back and 4-5, hopefully right behind it. But those are critical grades, but every grade is critical. Every one of these kids needs to be in school. You know, I've talked about it, and you can't get it back. And we know in Sherwood, and we know for kids that it's that connection to the adult, to their teacher. And I know these teachers have to be exhausted. They've done amazing stuff, but it just is so important to me to be able to move forward as best we can, as quickly as reasonable. And, you know, that for me, that isn't just K-3, 4, 5. That's everybody getting back to something and being in these amazing new buildings. You know, aside from what we know, there is so much we don't know. I feel like it's the tip of the iceberg on how kids are really doing. I just think there's a lot that we don't know. We know they're not succeeding. We know they're failing at a much higher rate. And, you know, I had the opportunity to participate on a Zoom call for a Washington County update, and the students that shared what they liked about distance learning and what they didn't like, you know, was pretty profound. What do they like? They like a little more time to sleep in because they don't have to get to their buildings. But when asked, you know, what, you know, how's it going? They said everything, you know, as far as what they don't like, nothing's going particularly well. It's fine, but it's just not the education that they're used to. It's just not the same, and they really want to be back with their peers. So I want to move forward as quickly as we can in a reasonable manner that, you know, yes, not everyone's going to be happy. I'd love to do it faster. You know, I just think it's so critical to get moving and to take some steps forward and move ahead. So thank you.
All right, thanks everybody. One other point I should make on the vaccines about the first dose, second dose. One of the things I'm very encouraged about is that we are doing a really good job of being sure that second doses are preserved for people who get first doses. And so once someone's gotten their first dose, there's really no substantial question about their being able to get the second dose. And so that process really is well underway at that point. Here's where I think we are and what I think the action I think we need to take. We don't have an action item on the agenda tonight, and I think that's appropriate. I think I've heard us all kind of nod our heads around 5 principles that we do in fact need to meet the revised metrics. We're not going to go outside those metrics. That we need the trend in cases not only to meet the metrics but be downward. And today both of those things are met, but we want to make sure that particularly that second one is met. That we need staff to have had the opportunity to get the first dose and the 2-week period for the maximum effectiveness of the first dose and thus be in line for the second dose. That we need to minimize mid-year disruptions, but do it in a way that provides maximum flexibility for people to make the changes that got outlined in terms of cloud campus versus in-person hybrid, all those kinds of things. And that we ultimately need to include as a part of this a call to action to the community for everybody to do their part to keep those case rates low so that in fact we minimize risk in schools. And then I think what I heard was some general head nodding around we need to delay the schedule that was outlined by staff. So here's what I would propose. I would propose that we informally indicate that that schedule would start on the 21st, not the 15th. And that we basically schedule, sorry for this guys, but weekly board meetings basically for the duration until we get to that point, so that we've got an opportunity each week to monitor the pace at which people are able to get access to vaccines, the case data that's available, and basically be ready on a sort of a week by week basis to make a formal decision to move forward on the 21st. But for now, use the 21st as the as kind of the planning date that we're working toward. Let me throw that out there and first ask Dr. Cordy, does that make sense to you?
Chair Allen, thank you, and board members for the conversation. You know, the comments that you just shared, the input that you give on this topic and others all along the way are just real clear and specific examples of the appreciation that we directed towards you during the spotlight on. And it's evident in how you think about challenges like this and what's at the center of your heart and your mind as you do that. I appreciate the guiding parameters or those principles. And I'm really thankful for the conversation around pushing the date out. I appreciated the education about the power, if you will, of the first vaccine. That was helpful for me, Chair Allen. And what I want to share, you know, we've talked and really acknowledged so much about the very different positions and opinions about how to approach this really complex issue. And as so many people have said in so many different ways, there's not an easy nor a straightforward way to do it. And I also want to share that today, each of my exec team members and I were a part of staff forums that were held at every elementary school, with our elementary principals leading those conversations. It was really important to us to share the information that was going to be shared tonight, so that there would be no surprises related to that. And all of our staff, you know this, but I want to say it anyway. All of our staff have worked so very hard over the course of the last 10 months. And our teachers figured out how to teach in what was an unimaginable CDL model. And I know that the tentative schedule that we shared today was a surprise. And I heard that from them. We heard that. We felt that. And we knew we needed to put together a model in order to host the conversation. And I just want to say to staff, the work that you have done and the heart that you continue to put in to everything you do, to say that it is appreciated is the understatement, the greatest understatement that we could make. And your vulnerability and input in the forums today, your honesty around your fears, your honesty around how hard it is to want your students to be back more than anything else, and to also fear for your elderly parents who live with you, or wondering what to do with your own fourth grade students. If you're a K-3 teacher, all of the things, please know you are heard, and your comments, your questions, your thoughts, your concerns were heard and respected. And I just want to say, Chair Allen, lastly, again, thank you, board, for the parameters and for the next steps as we move forward. Thank you.
Thanks.
Pat,
Yeah.
I do have one thing. I think one of the challenges about pushing a week, there had been a real thoughtful effort to try and back up the week of professional development to then the subsequent week being the launch of moving back to in-person. But it occurs to me that we may need to allow the team to figure out whether it makes sense to stick to that week of the 8th because it gives them a full 5 days, recognizing that then there would be a gap because the following week of the 15th is a 4-day week, followed by a 5-day week. So whether it may make sense for them to designate a professional development week that is a full 5 days, and then still have some gap in order to give that additional time for 2 weeks of vaccination, but to recognize that we may need to move on that same schedule just to allow the training to occur, so that that they're not having to take a Friday and then the Mondays off and then 4 days, and which may be more disruptive than just saying, let's just say it's going to be the week of the 8th from elementary, or I don't know. I think we ought to give them the flexibility to be able to make that call and what makes the most sense for the team, and have us kind of stay out of it.
Yeah, that was kind of part of my thinking of signing us up for weekly meetings, was knowing that this was going to be fast evolving, and that after having had a chance to get a good night's sleep and actually think about this and digest it tomorrow, that there may be any number of things that we need to come back and talk about. So having that regular touch base between now and any kind of a time that we move forward seems to kind of create space for that. All right. Has anyone got significant concerns with kind of the principles and timeline and meeting schedule that I just laid out for how we do this? Dr. Cordy, have you got enough you and your team got enough to go on?
Yes, thank you.
Great. Believe it or not, we have
Pat,
one more.
Pat,
Yes.
Ainsley's got something to say.
Oh, go ahead, Ainsley.
Yeah, so I really appreciate everything you guys are doing, especially with the elementary schoolers, because I understand how not of a good kid I used to be. And my parents would get so mad because I got a 2 in math, and they got so upset. I cannot imagine having to learn it over the internet and all of that stuff. Like, I would throw the biggest tantrum every time I had to do homework. I cannot imagine being a parent and having to make sure my student is actually doing the work, because I know that I definitely wouldn't have. So it's great that we're getting the elementary schools first. That's awesome. But I do want to propose that we maybe sort of also include seniors in that push, because like Sue said, this is time that we don't get back. And I know the seniors last year really struggled. I'm sorry, I'm getting emotional, but because they didn't get a graduation, they didn't get a prom. However, they did get a heck of a lot more than we're getting. I'm sure you guys all know what we're missing out on. And it just really hurts because when I started school, I was always looking forward to that senior year in High School Musical, and that's how it was going to be. But this not only would normal high school be not like High School Musical, but this is the complete opposite, to where we're just watching it on our screen. And the other day we went to the high school because I'm in AP photography, so we printed out our prints. So I went to pick it up, and I was giving a light to someone because he needed it, and I didn't even recognize him in person. And that really just like threw me for a loop, because over a screen you see them, but then in person is just totally different. And the fact that I couldn't even recognize my own classmate who I've seen every day for the last school year is really, it just really hurts me. And I understand if that would be super hard to get to, but I just want you guys to maybe consider, and I'm sorry for crying, I'm very emotional, but just try and consider maybe getting some seniors into it, because this is not only not ideal, but it is very hard for us mentally, knowing that we probably won't have normal anything. Because I know we won't have a normal graduation. We all know that. We all know we're not going to have senior prom. But it just, the better we could make it would be the better for us. Because I know that I personally, and me and my friends, are suffering so bad. Like, not only is the actual education part of it really hard, because the teacher, sometimes they just say, okay, do this, and then we leave the Zoom class and we don't see them till the next day. And I just want to make sure that our voices are heard, because I understand the public comment, that's great, but I don't know if a lot of people know that. And personally, I don't want many people more knowing, because that would be so much longer than it already was. But just from, like, and some seniors have already responded and said, like, I don't think we should go. But for the seniors who do want to go and want to learn in person and just want that social aspect, but not actually the social aspect, like, we understand social distancing, but for the people who want just a shred of being normal in this crazy world right now, I think we should try our hardest, possibly, please. So thank you for I'm sorry that took so long, but.
No, that's totally fine, Ainsley, and thank you so much for sharing that, and thank you so much for sharing your passion and your emotion. It's real, and it's an important piece of what we need to think about in considering this. So I really do appreciate that. Thank you. And it's hard to believe after that I need to turn to Mr. Bennett and board policies, but that is actually our last agenda item, is Mr. Bennett and board policies. So take it away.
And actually, Mr. Allen, it is not Mr. Bennett, it's Mr. Emmerich. And I know that this is the most anticlimactic way to end the evening possible. However, that being said, I want to start too just by thanking our board, thanking Ainsley, thanking our district leaders and our associations for all of the hard work. It's been hard. It's just been a heavy lift for people. And I could not be more proud of being a part of a district than I am tonight. Tough day, tough conversations, but very honest, vulnerable conversations. And that's how we move forward. So thank you, everyone. That being said, here we go. OSBA submits drafts of policy updates to the district periodically throughout the years. These suggested or mandated updates represent changes in law that impact board policy. Tonight, district administration is recommending policy revisions to policies in sections G, J, and L. And tonight we're bringing those to the board for first read and review. Any questions?
Any questions for Mr. Emmert or Mr. Bennett? I mean, why not? There being
That was
none.
almost as bad as timing for public comment.
All right, so those will come back for second read at our next regular meeting. Is there anything else for the general good we need to talk about tonight? If not, we are adjourned.